Tonight we are sailing into the dark waters of the ancient Mediterranean, where the horizon has almost disappeared beneath a veil of stars. And somewhere beyond that quiet line of black sea and silver moonlight, a song is waiting for you. You stand aboard a long wooden ship with Odysseus and the weary men who have followed him farther than any of them once imagined. Beneath your feet, the hull rises and settles with the breathing of the sea, salt hangs in the cool night air, tar, wet timber, old rope, and the faint smoke of the last cooking fire mingle around you. Above, the sail moves gently against the mast, while the stars appear bright enough to touch, and somewhere ahead are the Sirens. You have heard that no sailor who truly listens to their voices willingly sails away, yet Odysseus will do something almost unthinkable. He will approach them deliberately. He will hear what no surviving sailor is supposed to hear, and somehow he will continue toward home. So how does he escape? And perhaps the deeper question is this: why does he choose to listen at all? Before you sail farther, you might gently like the video and subscribe, and perhaps leave your location and local time in the comments, so that somewhere across the world, other travellers can imagine where you're listening beneath your own night sky. Then the shore begins to fade behind you. But this journey toward the Sirens does not begin with their song. It begins with a woman standing beside another distant shore. Circe. You have already spent what feels like another lifetime upon her island of Aiaia. The place remains behind you now, but its memory seems strangely close. You can almost smell wood smoke drifting through the sacred groves. You can remember sunlight falling across stone halls, herbs hanging beneath wooden beams, and animals moving through the shadows with an intelligence that never felt entirely natural. Circe had once been your enemy, then she became your host. And finally, something more difficult to define, in the oldest surviving version of this journey, preserved in Homer's Odyssey. Odysseus prepares to leave her island only after returning from the realm of the dead. You have followed him into darkness already. You have watched him seek the shade of the prophet Tiresias. You have heard warnings about the road home. Now Circe adds warnings of her own. There is something almost melancholy in this departure. Odysseus wants Ithaca. He has wanted Ithaca through storms, battles, monsters, hunger, temptation, and years of wandering, somewhere far to the west. Penelope waits within the palace halls, though we cannot know exactly what has happened there. Telemachus, the son he left as an infant, is no longer a child. Time has continued without him. That may be the quietest cruelty of his voyage. Every island can delay him. Every storm can carry him backward. Every beautiful refuge can become another theft of years. And now, as Aia disappears, you sense that Odysseus is no longer merely trying to cross a sea. He is trying to return before the person he once was disappears completely. Circe knows that. Before departure, she gives him a prophecy of dangers still waiting along his route. Among them are Scylla and Charybdis, terrible forces guarding a narrow passage. There are the sacred cattle of Helios, which must not be harmed. There are choices ahead that cannot end without suffering. But first come the Sirens. Circe's warning is unusual because she does not simply tell Odysseus to flee from them. She tells him how he may listen. You can imagine that detail remaining in his thoughts as the island falls behind. Why tell a curious man that forbidden knowledge can be approached safely? Odysseus has survived because he asks questions other heroes might never ask. He watches, he plans, he lies when lies are useful, he waits when stronger men might attack. But curiosity has another face. The same desire to know that allows you to escape danger can lead you directly toward it. Ancient Greek audiences knew this tension well. Wisdom was admired, but boundaries mattered. Mortals inhabited a world filled with powers older and greater than themselves. Temples, sacrifices, omens, and rituals were ways of acknowledging that the human world existed beside mysteries that could never be entirely controlled. Odysseus repeatedly approaches those boundaries, and somehow he keeps looking beyond them. The ship moves farther into darkness, around you. The crew settles into the rhythm of another passage. These are not the triumphant warriors who once sailed from Troy expecting glory. Their faces have been weathered by years, their hands are hardened by rope and oar. They have buried companions on unfamiliar shores and watched others disappear beneath waves. The sea has taught them caution, yet tonight it seems almost gentle. Water whispers against the hull. Somewhere above, rigging creaks softly. The temperature falls as the warmth of the vanished island gives way to open water. Perhaps one sailor looks back. Ea is becoming only a darker shadow beneath the stars. A final sacred fire might still be visible on the shore. Then even that disappears. No one aboard can know exactly where the Sirens' island lies. Ancient geography becomes uncertain here, and modern researchers have long debated whether these places preserve memories of real Mediterranean routes or belong entirely to the imaginative geography of oral tradition. Later writers would place the Sirens near different parts of southern Italy. But no coastline can settle the mystery. Perhaps that uncertainty is appropriate. The Sirens belong to the place where maps begin to fail. Ahead, the darkness looks empty, but Circe's warning travels with you. There will come a stretch of water where sweetness itself becomes dangerous. A voice will cross the sea. Odysseus will hear it. And when he does, he will ask the men who love him enough to obey his commands to ignore his next command entirely. For now, however, there is only night. You remain beside the mast as the ship glides westward. Moonlight trembles across the waves. The smell of salt fills your lungs. Behind you lies Circe's island and everything Odysseus has already survived. Ahead waits a song that knows things no mortal should know. And somewhere in the darkness, beyond sight, the Sirens are waiting for the ship to come closer. Long before the Sirens can be heard across the water, Circe's voice remains with you. The memory returns quietly as the ship moves beneath the fading stars. You remember standing on Aya before departure, when dawn had not yet fully reached the island and the world seemed suspended between darkness and morning. Mist rested among the trees. The scent of cedar smoke and crushed herbs drifted from Circe's halls. Somewhere beyond the grove, waves folded gently against the shore. Circe had known you were leaving. For a year, her island had offered something the wandering Greeks had almost forgotten: warm food, shelter, clean clothing, sleep without waves beneath them. After Troy, after the Ciccones, after the Lotus Eaters and the Cyclops, Aeaea had become dangerously close to comfort. Yet Odysseus could never mistake comfort for home. Ithaca remained somewhere beyond the western horizon, so Circe had called him close. You can imagine the goddess standing in the pale light. Calm in a way mortals rarely are. She belongs to that strange boundary in Greek mythology between divine and dangerous, helper and threat. Earlier, she transformed Odysseus's companions into swine. Hermes intervened, giving Odysseus the mysterious herb moly and instructions for resisting her magic. What began as confrontation eventually became hospitality. Now she offers knowledge, and knowledge, as Odysseus will soon discover, can be as dangerous as magic. Circe tells him that the voyage ahead will bring him first to the Sirens. The name itself would have carried unease across generations of Greek oral storytelling. The Sirens were remembered as beings whose voices could overcome human judgment. Later art often imagined them not as the fish-tailed figures familiar from much modern imagery, but as creatures combining the bodies of birds with the faces or upper forms of women. Archaeological finds from the Greek world preserve such winged figures on pottery, grave monuments, and decorative objects. Their exact origins remain uncertain. Some traditions connect them with river gods, others place them within the circle of Persephone. Another interpretation suggests that their association with death may be older than the particular episode in the Odyssey. But Circe does not pause to solve such mysteries. Her warning is practical. Every traveller who approaches their place will hear them singing, and those who stop do not return home. You picture a meadow near the shore, strangely peaceful beneath the sun. Yet around the singers lie the remains of men who once believed they could listen safely. The contrast is unsettling. There is no charging monster, no roaring beast, no weapon raised beneath torchlight. Only voices. That is what makes the warning different. Against Polyphemus, Odysseus needed a sharpened stake and deception. Against storms, sailors could reef sails and struggle at the oars. Against armed enemies, bronze could meet bronze. But how do you fight something you want to approach? Circe tells Odysseus there is a way. He must take beeswax. He must soften it and seal the ears of every member of his crew so completely that the sirens' voices cannot reach them. The men must row onward. They must not listen. Odysseus, however, may hear the song if he desires. That small permission changes everything. Perhaps Circe understands him too well. You can almost imagine a faint expression crossing her face as she gives the next instruction. Odysseus must stand against the mast. His companions must bind him there with ropes drawn tight around his body. If he begs to be released, they must not obey. If he commands them to untie him, they must bind him tighter. It is a strange prophecy because it predicts not only the danger ahead, but Odysseus's own behaviour. Circe is telling him what his future self will do. He will lose control. He will ask for freedom. And if his companions truly wish to save him, they must refuse their king. That warning settles over the memory like evening mist, for a man defined by cleverness. There is humility in accepting such a plan. Odysseus must admit that when the song reaches him, intelligence will no longer be enough. He must arrange his survival while he is still capable of reason. Ancient listeners may have recognized something deeply human in this. Greek mythology often returns to the limits placed upon mortals. Courage matters, intelligence matters, strength matters, but self-knowledge may matter more. A person who understands his weakness can prepare for it. A person who believes himself immune may already be lost. And Odysseus has reasons to be vulnerable. He wants knowledge almost as fiercely as he wants Ithaca. He wanted to discover who lived in the Cyclops' cave when his companions would have preferred to take provisions and leave. That curiosity brought Polyphemus into their story, and eventually drew the anger of Poseidon across their voyage. The old decision echoes here. Once before, Odysseus stayed because he wanted to know. Now he intends to listen for the same reason. Does he remember the Cyclops as Circe speaks? Homer does not tell you. No one can know what private memories move beneath the words of an ancient hero. But the pattern is difficult to ignore. Circe continues describing dangers beyond the Sirens. Yet something about this first warning lingers. Scylla can tear sailors from a deck. Charybdis can swallow the sea beneath a ship. Those horrors are visible. The Sirens attack through desire. And perhaps Circe's warning carries another meaning Odysseus cannot yet understand. Survival will depend upon his crew, not upon a god, not upon a sword, not even upon his famous cunning alone. He must place his life in the hands of ordinary exhausted sailors and trust them to disobey him at exactly the right moment. The thought follows you back into the present. Air is now far behind. Dawn begins to gather at the edge of the sea, turning black water slowly toward blue-grey. The men stir. Oars shift. Rope slides against wood. Odysseus stands near the stern, looking ahead. Perhaps Circe's final warning repeats within him. Do not trust the voice you will become when the sirens sing. The sea breeze touches your face. Somewhere beyond the morning haze lies an island no one aboard has seen. And before you can survive its song, you must first understand what kind of beings are waiting there. As morning spreads across the sea, the creatures waiting somewhere ahead remain invisible. That may be why they feel so powerful. You can watch the horizon for a raised wing, a pale face, a lonely island rising from the water, but there is nothing yet. Only sunlight moving across the waves, only the steady wooden rhythm of oars, only seabirds circling far behind the ship, their cries thinning into the distance. And still, you know the sirens are there. But what exactly are you sailing toward? For an ancient Greek listener, the answer was stranger than the image that later centuries would make familiar. You might imagine a beautiful woman rising from the sea with the tail of a fish, something close to the mermaids of later European folklore. Yet the oldest Greek sirens were usually something different. They had wings. On surviving Greek pottery, sculptures, and funerary objects, you find beings that combine human and bird-like forms. A woman's head may rise above the feathered body of a great bird. Sometimes arms appear. Sometimes the figure carries a musical instrument. Their faces can seem calm, almost solemn. They are not merely monsters. They belong to the borderland between beauty and death. You can imagine how such a creature might have felt to people living among the islands and harbours of the Greek world. Birds could travel where humans could not. They crossed cliffs, coastlines, mountains, and open water. Their voices came from above, from reeds, trees, and lonely places beyond sight, and birds were often associated with signs. A sudden flight across the sky might be read as an omen. The direction of wings, the behaviour of animals, the shape of smoke rising from sacrifice. Even an unexpected sound in the night could become part of the mysterious language through which mortals tried to understand divine intention. The sirens fit naturally into such a world, yet their origins are uncertain. Ancient traditions do not give you one simple genealogy. Some writers made them daughters of the river god Aeschylus, one of the great water powers of Greek myth. Their mother changes according to the tradition, sometimes connected with one of the muses. Another story places them near Persephone. Before Persephone became queen beside Hades, the sirens may have belonged among her companions in later accounts. When the earth opened and Persephone vanished into the underworld, the sirens received wings so they could search for her. But another version is darker. Their wings were not a gift. They were punishment. Ancient storytellers reshaped myths constantly, and no single account ruled every city or century. Perhaps the sirens failed to protect Persephone. Perhaps they challenged the muses in song and lost. Perhaps different local traditions were eventually woven around creatures whose origins were already ancient. Historians continue to debate how much of their identity was connected with death before Homer's story took shape. The surviving evidence leaves the question open, and perhaps that uncertainty would have suited them. You sail toward creatures whose power lies partly in what cannot be known. The morning wind strengthens, the sail fills above you, creaking against the mast, salt dries upon your lips. Sun-warmed wood feels rough beneath your palm. Odysseus looks ahead. He may know none of the later stories that generations will tell about the sirens. For him, Circe's warning is enough. Their meadow is surrounded by death. Their voices are beautiful, and they know things. That last detail matters most. The sirens of the Odyssey do not simply promise pleasure, they offer knowledge. When their voices eventually reach Odysseus, they will appeal to his identity as a survivor of Troy. They know the suffering endured by Greeks and Trojans. They claim knowledge of what happens across the fertile earth. Think about what that means for the man standing aboard this ship. Odysseus has spent years surrounded by uncertainty. He does not know what has happened in Ithaca. He does not know whether Penelope still waits. He does not know what kind of man Telemachus has become. He does not know which god will oppose him tomorrow. He has descended into the land of the dead precisely because he needed knowledge of the future. Now there are voices ahead promising more, perhaps everything, and there's an old warning hidden inside the promise. Human beings are not gods, in Greek thought. The boundary between mortal limitation and divine knowledge could be dangerous to cross. Oracles might reveal fragments of destiny, but often in language difficult to understand. Prophets saw what others could not. Yet their knowledge rarely made their lives peaceful. Tiresias possessed insight even among the dead, but his wisdom belonged to a world touched by loss. Knowledge always seemed to carry a price. The sirens offer it without sacrifice. That should make you suspicious. Yet Odysseus intends to listen. Perhaps he tells himself that the ropes will make the danger manageable. Perhaps he thinks Circe has given him a rare opportunity. Perhaps the temptation has already begun before the first note reaches him. The crew knows only enough to understand that danger lies ahead. Their relationship with their captain has been shaped by trust. but also by consequences. They have seen his plans save them. They have also suffered because of his pride, when Odysseus revealed his true name to Polyphemus after escaping the Cyclops. That moment of triumph gave Poseidon a reason to pursue them. A voice carried across water then too. Odysseus shouted his identity toward the shore. Soon another voice will cross the sea in the opposite direction. This time, it will call to him. The callback is almost cruel. Words spoken across the sea have already changed his fate once. Will he allow another voice to change it again? No one aboard can answer. By midday! Distant birds peer overhead and then turn away towards some unseen land. One sailor watches them disappear and mutters that perhaps they are an omen. Maybe there is an island ahead. Maybe the birds know better than the men where not to fly. The sea continues its slow rhythm, and somewhere beyond the brightness of the horizon, creatures with ancient wings are waiting beside a shore scattered with the remains of those who listened too long. You still cannot hear them, but now you understand why their song is feared. It does not promise merely beauty, it promises an end to uncertainty, and for Odysseus, that may be the most irresistible promise of all. The birds vanish behind you, and the sea becomes empty again. For several hours, nothing interrupts the voyage. The ship moves steadily beneath a pale blue sky, its dark hull cutting through long folds of water. Sunlight flashes along the oar blades. Rope creaks against wooden pegs, somewhere near the stern. A sailor repairs a worn leather strap while another checks a clay jar of drinking water. Ordinary tasks continue because they must, yet Odysseus carries an extraordinary decision. He intends to hear the sirens. You can feel the difference between this danger and those that came before. When Polyphemus trapped the Greeks inside his cave, survival demanded escape. When storms rose around the ship, no one chose to enter them. When Circe transformed the crew, Odysseus confronted her because his companions needed him. But the sirens can be avoided in a simpler way. Odysseus could seal his own ears with wax. He could pass their island without hearing a single note. Circe has effectively given him that choice, and he refuses it. Why? The answer lies somewhere within the man you've been following across these waters. Odysseus is not merely a warrior trying to return home. He's a man who needs to understand the world through which he moves. He studies strangers before trusting them. He invents stories, tests loyalties, examines weaknesses, and searches for hidden possibilities. His mind is always moving. That quality saved him at Troy. Greek tradition remembers him as one of the great architects of cunning victory. The wooden horse itself becomes associated with his intelligence in the broader cycle of Trojan legends, where Achilles represented overwhelming martial greatness. Odysseus represented something less visible: strategy, endurance, adaptability, language. But every gift contains its shadow. Curiosity becomes dangerous when the need to know matters more than the cost of knowing. You have already seen this in the cave of Polyphemus. Odysseus's companions wanted to take what they could and leave. He stayed because he wanted to meet the inhabitant of the cave and discover what kind of hospitality might be offered. That decision cost lives. Later, after escaping beneath the sheep, Odysseus could have disappeared across the water anonymously. Instead, he shouted his name. Pride demanded that the Cyclops know who had defeated him. Polyphemus then raised his hands toward the sky and called upon Poseidon, his father, placing a curse upon Odysseus's journey. That curse still follows you. Perhaps the sea itself seems to remember. A low swell lifts the ship. For a moment, the horizon disappears behind a wall of blue-green water, then rises again. Odysseus looks across it without speaking. There is a warning here if he chooses to recognize it. Once his desire to be known brought disaster. Now his desire to know may do the same. And yet there is a crucial difference. This time, Odysseus prepares for his own weakness. That may be the beginning of transformation. The man who shouted his name toward Polyphemus trusted the emotion of the moment. The man approaching the Sirens knows that the emotion of the moment cannot be trusted at all. He will bind himself before temptation arrives. There is something quietly profound in that choice. The Greeks told many stories about people destroyed not because they lacked strength, but because they crossed a boundary. A king might refuse proper respect to a god. A hunter might see what was forbidden. A gifted mortal might compare himself to a divine power. The precise details change from story to story, but the pattern remained familiar. Human greatness was real. Human limits were real too. The Sirens stand directly upon that boundary. Their promise of knowledge touches a question that would have felt deeply familiar in a culture of oracles, omens, dreams, sacrifices, and prophecy. You could seek knowledge of what was hidden, but you approached carefully. Imagine walking toward the sanctuary at Delphi in another age. Mountain air moves through olive groves beneath the slopes of Parnassus. Pilgrims arrive carrying questions about war, marriage, journeys, inheritance, disease, and destiny. Offerings accumulate around sacred spaces. Smoke rises from sacrifice. Everyone wants to know what comes next. Yet Apollo's answers, delivered through his oracle, do not necessarily make the future simple. Prophecy can illuminate. It can also burden. Odysseus already understands that, in the underworld. Tiresias warned him about the cattle of Helios, and spoke of difficulties awaiting him at home. The future was revealed, but knowing it did not remove the road that must be travelled. The Sirens offer something more seductive. Not a fragment. Everything. Or so they claim. Perhaps this is why their meadow is filled with dead men. Maybe those sailors did not die because the song was merely beautiful. Perhaps they remained because every answer led to another question. One revelation invited another. The world beyond the shore ceased to matter. A man who believes complete knowledge is only one more song away may never choose to leave. No surviving ancient account explains exactly how the Sirens kill every victim. Do they attack? Do sailors wreck upon the coast? Do listeners simply remain until hunger and thirst take them? Different interpretations survive, and the uncertainty makes the meadow more disturbing. Perhaps the Sirens do almost nothing. Perhaps desire completes the destruction. Late afternoon approaches. The sunlight grows warmer, turning the sea toward bronze. Far away, clouds gather into thin towers, their lower edges dark with distant rain. One of the sailors notices them. He points. A storm. Maybe, but the clouds remain far away. The wind continues from behind, carrying the ship onward. An older sailor touches a small charm at his neck. Another glances toward the sky as though searching for birds. In a world where gods move through wind, dreams, thunder, and sudden changes of fortune, coincidence is never entirely innocent. The distant clouds might mean nothing, or they might be an omen. No one can know what destiny intends. Odysseus watches them briefly, then turns toward the mast. Soon, that mast will become the center of his world. He places a hand against the timber. It is rough beneath his palm, warmed by the day. Perhaps he imagines the ropes already tightening around him. Perhaps he wonders what the Sirens will tell him. Will they speak of Troy, of Ithaca, of Penelope, of his own death? The last question would be difficult to resist. You remain near him as evening slowly enters the sky. The clouds on the horizon catch the dying light, glowing like distant sacred fires. Behind you lies the curse born from a shouted name. Head waits knowledge offered through a song. And between those two dangers stands Odysseus, beginning to understand that the greatest challenge may not be escaping the Sirens. It may be surviving the part of himself that wants to stay. Evening deepens, and the last imagined glow of Iaea seems to vanish completely behind the curve of the sea. You can no longer turn and find Circe's island. There is only open water in every direction, darkening beneath the sky where the first stars have begun to appear. The wind remains gentle, filling the sail just enough to carry the ship onward, while the oars rest for a time beside the exhausted men. Yet the island remains in memory. You remember the morning of departure more clearly now, the final meal beside Circe's halls, the smell of bread and roasted meat, the warmth of sacred fire against cool dawn air. Dew had clung to the grasses. Cypress branches moved softly above the path toward the shore. For the crew, Departure had carried relief. For Odysseus, it carried something heavier. Circe had become part of the strange pattern of his wandering. Again and again. He reaches places that could almost become homes. Again and again. He must leave them. The Lotus Eaters offered forgetfulness. Circe offered comfort. Later, another island will offer something even more difficult to refuse, but Ithaca remains beyond all of them. You can imagine Odysseus stepping onto the ship and looking west, toward a homeland he cannot see. Perhaps he remembers olive trees growing from rocky soil. Perhaps he remembers the uneven mountains of his island rising above the Ionian Sea. Perhaps he sees Penelope standing in a palace doorway as she appeared years earlier, before Troy consumed a decade of his life. Memories imperfect, after so long away. Perhaps he sometimes wonders whether he remembers home as it truly was. That question follows him like another shadow. The men push away from Essaea. Wood scrapes against the beach. Water rises around their ankles as they guide the hull outward. Then the oars take hold, and the island begins to recede. Circe stands somewhere behind. Homer does not linger over a dramatic farewell between them. The ancient poem moves forward because Odysseus must move forward. Yet you can imagine the silence left by such a departure. Circe knows what waits ahead. Odysseus knows only what she has told him. That difference matters. The gods and supernatural beings of Greek myth often possess a wider view than mortals. Human beings walk along a road one moment at a time. They know what has happened behind them. But the next bend remains hidden. Prophecy offers a glimpse around that bend, never the whole landscape. Circe has warned Odysseus about the Sirens, Scylla, Charybdis, and the cattle of Helios. The warnings might seem like protection, but they also create a burden. You now know that suffering is waiting. You simply do not know exactly how it will arrive. Perhaps that is why the men are not told everything immediately. Odysseus carries knowledge for them. Leadership has become a lonely form of memory. The sea wind strengthens. You hear the sail snap once above you before settling. The mast groans. A sailor checks the steering oar while another studies the clouds gathering low along the horizon. Then something changes. The birds disappear. It happens so gradually that you notice only after the sky has become empty. No gulls, no distant wings, no cries carried over the water. The absence feels unnatural. One sailor looks upward. Another glances toward Odysseus. In ancient seafaring cultures, birds could be practical signs of nearby land, but they could also carry symbolic meaning. Greek stories are filled with creatures whose appearance or behavior becomes an omen. Eagles, serpents, dreams, thunder. Sudden winds. The world was not always silent about what lay ahead. But what does silence mean? No one can say. Odysseus gives no order to turn back. The ship continues. Hours pass. The stars multiply overhead until the sky seems deeper than the sea beneath you. The Milky Way stretches pale across the darkness. Without modern lights along the coastline, the ancient night would have felt immense, filled with constellations used by sailors to orient themselves through uncertain waters. You can smell salt and damp rope. A cloak feels coarse against your skin. The deck is cooling beneath your feet. Somewhere below, pottery jars knock softly together whenever the ship rolls. Odysseus remains awake. Perhaps Circe's warning has made sleep impossible. You remember her instructions again. Wax for the ears of the crew. Ropes around the captain. Do not release him, even if he begs. Especially if he begs. The warning carries more weight now that there is no shore behind you, and it recalls another voice across another stretch of water. Polyphemus. Odysseus had escaped the Cyclops and then surrendered to pride, shouting his identity toward the island. The Cyclops answered with a curse, calling upon Poseidon to make the journey home bitter and long. That curse has not been forgotten. The sea belongs to Poseidon. Every wave beneath the hull can remind you of it, and perhaps this is another reason the Sirens are so dangerous. Odysseus is already travelling through a world where one god's hostility can turn the ocean against him. To approach another supernatural danger willingly seems almost reckless. But there is no hesitation now. Near midnight, a sailor sees something. A faint light appears far ahead. It is visible for only a moment. Perhaps moonlight struck a distant wave. Perhaps lightning flickered behind the horizon. Perhaps a fire burns upon an island. The sailor points, but when the others turn, the light is gone. They wait. Nothing returns. Historians can reconstruct much about ancient Mediterranean navigation from archaeology. Shipwrecks, pottery, literary descriptions, and later maritime traditions. Yet the precise geography of Odysseus's wanderings remains one of the enduring mysteries surrounding the Odyssey. Generations have tried to place his islands upon real maps. The Sirens have been located near various shores of southern Italy by later tradition, but the poem itself belongs to a sea where geography and myth overlap. Perhaps the vanished light ahead belongs to that border. Odysseus watches the darkness. No one speaks. Then shortly before dawn, the wind begins to weaken. The sail loses some of its shape. The waves flatten. You hear the water more clearly now, touching the hull with small, almost delicate sounds. The men exchange glances. Circe had described what waited ahead. And although she didn't give them a map drawn upon parchment, her warning now seems to live in every change of the sea. Odysseus rises. He looks toward the east, where a thin band of grey has begun to divide sky from water. Morning's coming, and with it comes a decision that can no longer remain only in his thoughts. Soon he must tell his companions what they are approaching. Soon wax will be softened. Rope will be prepared. Soon the mast beneath his hand will become the only thing preventing him from answering the most beautiful voices he will ever hear. The horizon brightens slowly. Behind you, Ea has become memory. Ahead, the sea is growing strangely still. And somewhere beyond the pale light of dawn, the first invisible boundary of the Sirens' world may already have been crossed. Dawn comes without birdsong. The eastern horizon slowly turns from charcoal to pearl, then pale gold, revealing a sea so smooth that the ship seems to be moving across polished stone. The wind has weakened almost completely. Above you, the sail hangs loose against the mast. Every sound feels strangely close, the knock of wood, the scrape of a sandal, the soft breathing of tired men waking beneath their cloaks. Odysseus watches the water. He has seen calm seas before. This feels different. Perhaps it is only weather. Mediterranean winds can change quickly, leaving sailors dependent upon their oars. Yet Circe's warning is too recent to ignore. A journey towards supernatural danger does not allow coincidence to remain simple. One sailor dips his hand into the water. Coolness runs across his fingers. Another studies the horizon. Nothing moves there. No merchant vessel, no fishing boat, no smoke from a settlement, no mountains rising beyond the haze. Only silence. Odysseus knows that the moment has arrived. He gathers the crew. You move closer with them, forming a loose circle around the mast while morning light spreads across weathered faces. These men have followed Odysseus through years of war and wandering. Some have seen Troy burn, some survived the Cicones. They escaped the Lotus Eaters, Polyphemus, the Lestrygonians, and Circe's enchantment. Their number is smaller now. Every empty place aboard the ship is a memory. Odysseus looks from one man to another. He does not tell them everything. That choice has always been part of his leadership. Sometimes knowledge helps a sailor survive. Sometimes knowledge can paralyze him before danger even arrives. Odysseus has learned to decide which truth belongs to everyone and which truth he must carry alone. Whether he always chooses correctly is another question. He tells them that Circe warned of a danger ahead. There is an island. There are voices. No man must hear them. The crew listens without interruption. Perhaps one sailor remembers Circe's magic and needs no further persuasion. He has already seen companions transformed by supernatural power. He knows that impossible things exist beyond the edges of familiar harbours. Another man may look sceptical. A song, after cyclopes and storms, after giants hurling rocks into ships, is a song truly something to fear. Odysseus does not smile. He explains that anyone who hears these singers is drawn toward them. The traveller forgets the voyage. Home ceases to matter. Wife, child, palace, harvest, old age. Every future awaiting beyond the horizon becomes less important than remaining beside the voices. The men glance toward the empty sea. Perhaps that description frightens them more than claws or teeth. Every man aboard wants something beyond this voyage. A familiar doorway, a vineyard, a mother grown older, a child who may barely remember him, a grave beside his ancestors when his years are finally finished. The Sirens threaten not merely life, they threaten return. Odysseus gives his first command. Beeswax must be prepared. The men exchange uncertain looks, but no one argues. Wax would have been familiar in the ancient Mediterranean world. Bees were valued not only for honey, but for the material their hives produced. Useful in practical crafts and ritual contexts alike. Here, something humble becomes the defense against supernatural power. There is no enchanted shield, no sword forged by a god, only wax. And then Odysseus gives the stranger command. When the island draws near, they must bind him to the mast. For a moment, perhaps the crew assumes he means that everyone will be restrained. Then they understand. Only him. He will not place wax in his own ears. He intends to listen. You can almost feel the silence change. These men know their captain. They know his intelligence. They also know his curiosity. Some may remember the cave of Polyphemus. Perhaps no one needs to speak the memory aloud. Odysseus sees the concern in their faces and continues. Once he is bound, no command he gives can release him. That statement must sound extraordinary aboard a Bronze Age ship. The captain is surrendering authority over his own body. He is telling the men that soon his words will cease to represent his true will. If he orders them to untie him, they must ignore him. If he threatens them, they must ignore him. If he pleads, they must ignore him. And if he struggles, they must add more ropes. There is the warning. Not from Circe now, from Odysseus himself. He is creating a promise between his present mind and his future companions. Save me from the man I'm about to become. One sailor asks what the Sirens will sing. Odysseus cannot answer. Perhaps that is what troubles him most. Will they offer knowledge of Troy? Will they tell him whether Penelope still waits? Will they speak of Telemachus? Will they reveal the day of his death? Circe has told him enough to survive, but not enough to remove mystery. Ancient Greek stories often treat prophecy in precisely this way. You receive a warning, yet the warning itself creates new questions. Knowledge opens one door and reveals another locked behind it. The crew begins preparing. A sailor brings out wax, another checks the ropes. Odysseus watches them work. There is something different in him now from the man who taunted Polyphemus after escaping the Cyclops. Pride had driven him to shout his name across the water, allowing a curse to follow him. This time he prepares restraints before pride or desire can speak. Perhaps suffering has taught him something. Perhaps not enough. The sun climbs higher. The sea remains calm. Then a man near the bow points toward the water. A dead fish floats past. Then another. No wound is visible. A third appears farther away, pale beneath the surface. The sailors watch in silence. There may be a natural explanation. Changes in water, temperature, disease, or countless ordinary forces can leave dead creatures drifting upon the sea. But to these men, approaching a place touched by supernatural danger, the sight feels like an omen. One sailor whispers a prayer. Another touches the wooden rail. Odysseus looks ahead. Still no island. Then almost imperceptibly, the air changes. The familiar smell of open sea remains, but another scent seems to move through it. Flowers, faint and sweet, impossible to place. Perhaps it comes from land hidden beyond the haze. Perhaps imagination has already begun working upon everyone aboard. No one can know. The men return to their preparations more quickly. Rope is tested. Wax is divided. The oars are made ready because the wind can no longer be trusted to carry them. Odysseus steps toward the mast and places both hands upon it. Soon he'll be bound here. Soon the men standing around him must choose whether they trust his earlier command more than the desperate voice they will see coming from his mouth. And that may be the true test waiting ahead. The Sirens will test Odysseus with knowledge, but they will test his crew with loyalty. The sun rises into a silent sky. A strange sweetness remains upon the air, and somewhere beyond the haze, something may already know that Odysseus is coming. The sweetness in the air grows stronger. It is still faint enough that you might question whether you truly smell it. But the sailors have noticed it too. One man lifts his face toward the motionless sky. Another looks toward the horizon, searching for trees or flowers that might explain the fragrance. There is still no visible island, only haze. The sun climbs higher, warming the deck beneath your feet, without the wind. The heat settles heavily over the ship. Sweat gathers beneath wool and linen. The smell of salt, timber, bodies, and old leather mixes with that impossible perfume drifting from somewhere ahead. Odysseus gives the order. Prepare the wax. A sailor brings forward the beeswax they have carried from Circe's island. It is firm at first, golden and dull in the sunlight. Odysseus takes it into his hands and begins working it between his fingers. Slowly, warmth changes it. The wax softens. His thumbs press into it. His palms roll and knead it. What was rigid becomes pliable enough to shape. The action is strangely ordinary. You might almost forget that it is being performed because somewhere ahead. Supernatural voices are waiting to destroy anyone who hears them. No bronze armor can protect these men. No shield, no spear. Instead, their survival depends upon something produced by bees. There is an old beauty in that. Greek mythology often places immense consequences inside humble objects. A thread can lead someone through a labyrinth. A wooden horse can destroy a city. A small herb can protect a man from a goddess's magic. Now wax will stand between sailors and death. Odysseus divides it carefully. The men watch. Some seem uneasy. Others appear almost relieved to have something practical to do. Fear becomes easier to carry when your hands have a task. One sailor checks an oar. Another tightens a leather fastening. A third takes a length of rope and pulls it between his hands, testing the fibers. That rope matters just as much as the wax, perhaps more. Odysseus looks toward the mast. You remember the warning he gave only a short time ago. Whatever I say, do not release me. The command has already transformed the relationship between captain and crew. Ordinarily, Odysseus's voice guides the ship. When he tells the men to row, they row. When he orders the sail raised, hands reach for rope. When danger appears, they look toward him because leadership depends upon recognizing one voice among many. Soon that system must reverse. Odysseus will speak, and loyalty will mean refusing to obey. He chooses several men to bind him. They approach the mast with the rope. One of them hesitates. You can understand why. To bind a king against a mast feels wrong even when the king commands it. These sailors live within a world shaped by rank, obligation, hospitality, divine order, and personal loyalty. Odysseus is not merely another traveller aboard the ship. He is their leader, their connection to Ithaca, and the mind that has repeatedly found paths through impossible dangers. Yet he is asking them to prepare for a moment when that mind will fail. Odysseus places his back against the timber. The mast is warm from the sun. The first rope passes around his chest. It circles the wood behind him and returns across his body. The sailors pull it tight. Another length goes around his waist. Then another. His arms remain restrained against the mast. He tests the binding. The rope presses into his tunic. Fibers scratch against skin where cloth has shifted. He pulls forward. The mast holds him. Harder. Still it holds. Odysseus shakes his head. Tighter. The sailors exchange glances. Then they obey. The rope is drawn until there is almost no freedom of movement left. This is not ceremonial restraint. It must withstand panic. Circe's prophecy was precise. Odysseus will want to escape these ropes. Not perhaps, not possibly. He will. The knowledge gives the preparation an eerie quality. You're watching men defend themselves against an event that has not happened yet. Because a goddess has already described the weakness that will come. Odysseus tests the ropes again. Satisfied, he orders them loosened for the moment. The island is not yet visible, but the practice has taught everyone what must be done. No hesitation later. No argument. No pity. If Odysseus begs, Tighten the ropes. The men release him. Red marks remain where the fibers pressed through his clothing. He rubs one wrist and looks toward the sea. Perhaps he wonders how desperately he will struggle when the song begins. Perhaps he wonders whether Circe herself once heard it. The poem does not tell you. Another uncertainty remains as well. Why is Odysseus allowed to hear the sirens when his men are not? Is this merely his curiosity? Or is there something about heroic identity that demands experience even when experience carries terrible risk? Another interpretation suggests that Odysseus survives precisely because he refuses both extremes. He does not flee knowledge completely, but neither does he approach it without limits. He creates a boundary around himself. The mast becomes that boundary. For ancient audiences, the image could carry meanings beyond the immediate adventure. Self-control was admired. But Odysseus's method is more subtle than simple discipline. He does not assume he will remain rational. He plans for irrationality. You can promise yourself many things while the sea is calm. The test comes when the song begins. The sailors start inserting the softened wax. Odysseus moves from man to man, pressing it carefully into their ears. One sailor winces. Another laughs briefly at the strange sensation, though the laughter fades when he realizes he can barely hear his own voice. Soon the world begins disappearing for them. The sea still moves. The hull still creaks. The oars still strike against wooden fittings. But for the crew, silence closes in. You imagine how unsettling it must feel. Men speak and cannot hear one another. A sailor stamps his foot against the deck and feels vibration through the timber without receiving the familiar sound. Communication becomes gesture. Eyes matter now. Hands, memory. The captain's earlier instructions. Odysseus alone remains able to hear. A final piece of wax rests in his palm. For a moment, he could still change his mind. He could place it into his own ears. He could cross safely with the others. No one would think less of him. Perhaps no one would ever know what opportunity he had refused. He looks at the wax, then closes his hand around it. No, he has chosen. The mast waits. The sailors understand. They bind him again. Rope crosses his chest. His waist. His arms. Knots tighten. Odysseus looks toward each man until he is certain they remember. Do not free me. One sailor nods. Then something touches the ship. Not a wave. The sea is almost perfectly flat. A vibration passes through the hull, so faint that you feel it more than hear it. Odysseus raises his head. The men continue rowing, unaware. Another vibration comes, then silence. Perhaps wood shifted beneath tension. Perhaps some distant swell reached the hull. Or perhaps sound has travelled through the water from somewhere beyond the haze. Odysseus stares ahead. The sunlight seems softer now. Mist gathers low across the sea. Within it, a darker line begins to form. Land. The crew cannot hear Odysseus when he speaks. But you can. He says only one word. Row. The oars descend together. The ship moves toward the haze. Behind wax, the sailors inhabit silence. Against the mast, Odysseus waits inside a world of sound. And somewhere ahead, hidden by white mist and brilliant sunlight, the sirens have only to begin singing. The oars descend together, and the ship enters the mist. At first, nothing seems different except the silence of the crew. You can still hear what they cannot, the wooden blades dipping into water, the faint groan of the hull, rope shifting against the mast, Odysseus breathing behind you. Yet even these sounds seem strangely exposed now, as though the sea has removed every unnecessary noise and left only the smallest details behind. There is no wind. The sail hangs motionless. The surface of the water has become so smooth that the oars leave long dark scars behind them. Each disturbance widens slowly, then fades until the sea looks untouched again. Odysseus watches the haze. The ropes around him are already tight. He could still call the men back. He could order them to turn before anything begins. They would not hear his voice through the wax, but a clear gesture might still be understood. He does nothing. The ship continues forward, and gradually the ordinary world seems to withdraw. No gull circles overhead. No fish breaks the surface. No breeze touches your face. Even the familiar smell of salt becomes weaker beneath that strange sweetness you first noticed hours ago. It now resembles flowers warmed beneath afternoon sun, though there are still no flowers in sight. Perhaps the scent comes from the island. Perhaps it is part of the Sirens' power. Homer gives you no perfume, no magical mist, no elaborate description of an enchanted atmosphere. The surviving poem is more restrained, leaving later generations to imagine the landscape around those voices. Yet this absence creates room for an older fear, the possibility that nothing needs to look dangerous. A beautiful shore can kill you. A peaceful meadow can become a graveyard. A song can be more dangerous than a storm. Odysseus shifts against the mast. The rope scratches across his chest. He looks toward the sailors. Their faces are concentrated upon the work. Without hearing the splash of their own oars, they must rely upon sight and rhythm. One man watches another's shoulders. The next follows the movement beside him. Their bodies create a pattern together. They are isolated by silence, yet united through motion. Odysseus alone is separated from them in another way. He can hear. Soon that difference will become enormous. For now he hears only water. Then the water changes. The small sound of the oars seems to lose its echo. It is as though the open sea has become a chamber lined with something soft, swallowing noise almost immediately. Odysseus raises his head. Circe's warning returns. The Sirens wait beside their meadow. Anyone who hears their song and approaches will never again be welcomed home by wife and children. Home. That word must have struck deeply when Circe spoke it. Odysseus has survived every danger because the journey still leads somewhere. Ithaca gives suffering's direction. Without Ithaca, these years become only wandering. The Sirens threaten to erase that direction. Perhaps this is why their temptation is more profound than simple enchantment. They do not need to make Odysseus hate his home. They only need to offer something he desires more in a single irresistible moment. Knowledge. The mast creaks behind him. You remember Polyphemus again. The Cyclops had also tested the relationship between curiosity and survival. Odysseus entered the cave because he wanted to encounter its inhabitant. Later he revealed his name because he wanted his victory known. Poseidon's curse followed. Now for the first time, Odysseus has turned his own flaw into part of a plan. He knows he will want too much, so he has made wanting powerless. At least, that is the hope. The haze begins thinning. A dark shape appears ahead. The island, it rises low from the water, without the towering cliffs you might expect from a place of legendary danger. The shoreline seems gentle. Pale rock meets a narrow strip of earth. Beyond it, you can just make out vegetation under the brightening sky. Nothing moves. Odysseus stares. Perhaps he expected monsters. Instead, he sees peace. The sailors see the island too. A few glance toward their captain. He gestures forward. Keep rowing. They obey. As the distance closes, details emerge. A meadow lies beyond the shore. Tall grasses move faintly. That is strange. There is no wind at sea, yet the grass moves. You watch it bend in slow waves, as though an invisible breath passes across the land. Odysseus notices. His expression changes. An omen. Perhaps ancient Greek audiences inhabited stories in which nature could announce the presence of divine or supernatural forces. Sacred groves belonged to gods. Springs could possess holiness. Mountains became meeting places between mortal and divine worlds. A meadow that moves beneath a windless sky would not feel empty. It would feel inhabited. The sailors continue rowing. Then Odysseus hears something. A single sound, so faint that at first it might be imagination. He turns his head. Nothing. The sound disappears. He waits. There. Again. It is not yet a voice. Not quite music. Only a distant tone carried across the still water. So pure that it seems to have no direction. It could be coming from the island. It could be coming from behind you. It could almost be inside your own thoughts. Odysseus pulls once against the rope, not to escape, only to test it. The knots hold. The men cannot hear the tone. Their faces remain unchanged. They row steadily, watching one another. Odysseus is alone with it. The sound fades again. His breathing slows. He listens. This is the moment Circe predicted. The warning has crossed from future into present, and there is something unsettling about realizing that prophecy has begun to fulfill itself. What else did Circe foresee correctly? Scylla, Charybdis, the cattle of Helios. How much of the road ahead is already waiting, fixed somewhere beyond human sight? Greek mythology rarely offers an easy answer to the question of fate. Even gods sometimes seem constrained by what must happen. Prophecies may be resisted, misunderstood, delayed, or fulfilled precisely through attempts to escape them. Odysseus cannot know whether his ropes represent freedom from destiny, or the means by which destiny will occur. He only knows they are tight. The ship draws nearer. You can now distinguish shapes at the edge of the meadow. At first they resemble pale stones, then perhaps driftwood. The distance is still too great. One shape seems curved like a rib. Another lies half hidden in grass. Odysseus narrows his eyes. He knows what Circe said waited around the singers. Remains! The evidence of those who came before. Yet before he can see clearly, the sound returns. This time there are two tones. They rise together. Not loud, not threatening. Beautiful. The effect on Odysseus is immediate. His eyes close for a heartbeat. When they open, he looks no longer toward the bones in the meadow. He looks toward the place from which the sound is coming. And now you understand something terrible. The Sirens do not need to overcome the silence of the sea. The silence was preparing you for them. Every missing bird, every vanished gust, every softened sound has created a world in which nothing exists except the approaching song. The sailors row. Odysseus listens. The island draws closer, and from somewhere within the motionless brightness ahead, the first unmistakable trace of a voice begins to cross the water. The voice does not become a song immediately. It hovers at the edge of hearing for a few moments. You cannot decide whether it belongs to a woman, a bird, or something stranger than either. It rises from somewhere beyond the pale shoreline, touches the still water, and disappears before the mind can hold it. Odysseus does not move. Only his eyes betray him. They search the island. The mist has thinned enough now for you to see the shore clearly. White stone lies beneath the shallow water. Beyond it rises a meadow touched by sunlight, with tall grasses bending in those impossible waves despite the absence of wind. Farther inland, dark trees gather, perhaps cypress, perhaps pine. Their shapes stand motionless against the bright sky. No harbour waits there. No fishing boat rests upon the beach. No smoke rises from a household fire. In a world of busy Mediterranean coasts, where sailors watched for settlements, temples, cultivated slopes, shepherds, and signals from shore, the absence of human activity feels wrong. The island is beautiful and empty, or almost empty. The pale shapes scattered through the grass are becoming clearer. Bones. Odysseus sees them. Some lie bleached beneath the sun. Others seem tangled among weeds near the edge of the meadow. You can make out what may once have been ribs, long bones, perhaps the curved shape of a skull. How long have they rested there? Years. Generations. Myth gives you no answer. The dead have no names. Perhaps that is part of the horror. Every sailor who reached this shore once had a destination. Somewhere, someone expected his return. A wife may have watched a harbour. A father may have kept an inheritance. Children may have asked when a familiar sail would appear. Then the song intervened. Their journeys ended without anyone at home knowing why. Odysseus stares at the remains, and for a moment the warning is visible rather than remembered. Circe had spoken of men wasting away beside the Sirens. Now the meadow seems to confirm her prophecy. The ropes around Odysseus suddenly appear less like restraints and more like armour. The sailors cannot hear what he hears. They can see the bones, however. One man notices them. His rowing falters. The sailor beside him immediately gestures for him to continue. Another turns toward Odysseus. The captain nods sharply. Forward. The oars bite into the water again. No one turns back. You can feel the ship advancing one stroke at a time. The island grows larger. and still you have not clearly seen the sirens themselves. Perhaps there are figures among the rocks. A pale shape appears near the trees, then seems to vanish behind tall grass. Another stands higher on a slope. Are those wings? At this distance, you cannot know. Ancient artists would eventually give the sirens many forms on painted vessels. They appear as birds with women's heads. In other works, their human features become more pronounced. Some hold lyres, some stand beside the dead. Their association with music and mortality follows them across centuries. Archaeological discoveries have found siren imagery in funerary contexts, suggesting that Greeks could imagine these beings as more than monsters from a sailor's tale. They belonged near death. Perhaps song itself helped explain why. A lament can connect memory with absence. Music can preserve the name of someone who no longer lives. Epic poetry itself keeps dead heroes present through performance. The sirens perform a darker version of that power. Their song does not merely remember the past. It seems to possess it. Odysseus has spent years carrying Troy inside him. He remembers walls illuminated by fire, bronze flashing beneath sunlight, companions who never boarded ships for home. What would happen if a voice could sing those memories back perfectly? What if it knew details he never witnessed? What if it could tell him why all that suffering happened? Perhaps that is the bait. The sound comes again. Longer now. 2 voices, perhaps 3, blending so smoothly that you cannot separate them. Odysseus closes his eyes. The crew rows. For the men behind wax, there's only silence and the sight of their captain listening to something they cannot perceive. Then the voices stop. The absence feels painful. Odysseus opens his eyes immediately. He leans forward against the ropes, waiting. That may be the first true sign of danger. He wants the sound to return. Only moments ago, the sirens were something to survive. Now part of him already desires them. The prediction is unfolding. Circe knew. Odysseus breathes slowly and looks toward the mast, as though reminding himself why he chose to be bound. But the wood cannot protect his thoughts. It can only prevent his body from following them. The island is close enough now that you smell vegetation beneath the sweetness. Warm grass, dry earth, perhaps flowers. The fragrance is almost domestic, like a hillside in summer. Nothing about it smells of death. That contradiction deepens the unease. The meadow should reek of decay if Circe's description were literal. Yet perhaps the supernatural place preserves its beauty. Or perhaps ancient poetry is not interested in physical realism here. The dead exist as warning, while the song remains untouched by corruption. Historians continue to debate whether Homeric landscapes preserve echoes of actual seafaring hazards transformed through oral tradition. Later geography associated the sirens with the coast of southern Italy and islands near Campania, where dangerous waters and dramatic shorelines offered natural homes for legend. But no map resolves what you see now. The Sirens' Island is more powerful as a threshold than as a coordinate. On one side lies ordinary human life, on the other lies knowledge without limit. The ship passes between them. Then something changes in the light. A cloud moves across the sun. For the first time since entering the strange calm, shadow falls over the deck. Odysseus looks upward. The cloud is small, solitary, almost perfectly dark beneath its silver edges. A divine sign, perhaps only weather. Yet one of the sailors sees it and touches his chest instinctively. The shadow crosses the ship. For a heartbeat, the island seems darker too. And there, upon a low rise beyond the meadow, you finally see them. Figures, still watching. Their forms are difficult to understand at first. Human faces seem to emerge from bodies shaped by wings and feathers. One stands upon a stone, another rests lower in the grass. They do not rush toward the shore. They do not need to. They have seen the ship. Perhaps they have been watching since it entered the haze. Odysseus sees them. His body becomes still. One of the figures raises its head. The cloud passes. Sunlight returns, and the sirens begin to sing. This time there is no uncertainty. The voices move across the sea with impossible clarity, gentle enough to feel intimate despite the distance. They do not roar. They invite, and then, through the melody, words begin to form. Words meant for one man. The sailors row in silence. The ropes tighten against Odysseus's chest as he leans forward, and from the deadly shore, the sirens prepare to tell him that they already know exactly who he is. The song reaches you without crossing the distance in any ordinary way. One moment, the sirens are figures upon a distant rise beyond the meadow. The next, their voices seem close enough to whisper beside Odysseus's ear. There is no strain in them, no scream, no command. The sound is gentle, almost tender, and that tenderness makes it more dangerous. Odysseus lifts his head against the mast. The ropes remain tight across his chest and waist. His hands cannot reach the knots around him. The sailors continue rowing through their manufactured silence, their ears sealed with Circe's wax. They cannot hear what has entered his world. The melody rises. For a heartbeat, Odysseus seems almost peaceful. Perhaps he expected temptation to feel like an attack. Perhaps he imagined a supernatural force invading his thoughts. Something obvious enough to resist. Instead, the song feels familiar. That is the first trap. It seems to belong to memory. You hear something within it like wind moving across Ithacan hillsides. You imagine olive leaves trembling beneath a warm afternoon sky. Somewhere, goats call from rocky slopes. Far below, water touches the familiar coast of home. Then another sound appears. Penelope, not her actual voice, perhaps, but something close enough that the distinction suddenly seems unimportant. Odysseus closes his eyes. Years disappear. For an instant, he is no longer a weathered survivor bound against the mast of a wandering ship. He is younger. Troy has not yet consumed 10 years. Poseidon has not yet cursed the road home. Penelope stands before him. Telemachus is still an infant. The palace at Ithaca is filled with ordinary sounds that once seemed too small to remember footsteps across stone. Servants moving through corridors, the crackle of an evening fire, vessels placed upon a table. The sirens have found the place where longing and memory touch. But then the melody changes. The warmth of Ithaca darkens. You hear bronze, a shield struck by a spear, men shouting beyond walls. The roar of fire, Troy. Odysseus opens his eyes. The island remains before him. The sirens are still singing, and now their words begin to emerge clearly from the music. They welcome him, not as a nameless sailor, not as a stranger. They know who approaches. Odysseus, the famous Greek who came from Troy. The effect is immediate. His shoulders tense. Once before, upon the sea, his name became the source of catastrophe. After escaping Polyphemus, Odysseus had shouted his identity because anonymity felt unbearable. He wanted the Cyclops to know the man who defeated him. That declaration allowed Polyphemus to call upon Poseidon. Now Odysseus has spoken no name at all, and still the sirens know it. The old curse seems to echo through the moment. Once, he risked everything to make an enemy know who he was. Now he faces beings who require no introduction. How? That question alone might be enough to draw him closer. Have they heard stories carried from shore to shore? Are they prophetic? Do they possess divine knowledge? Or does their song simply reveal what the listener most desperately expects to hear? The poem never gives you a complete explanation. That mystery is part of their power. Odysseus pulls gently against the rope. The fibers tighten. He stops. The sailors row. The sirens continue. They sing of Troy as though they had watched from the plain. They know the suffering of Greeks and Trojans beneath those walls. They know the long years of battle, the deaths of heroes, the grief of families, and the destruction that followed victory. For Odysseus, this is not distant history. He carries those years in his body. He remembers cold mornings beside the ships, dust rising beneath armies, sacrificial smoke climbing toward indifferent skies. He remembers councils held beneath torchlight. He remembers friends who entered battle and never returned. Perhaps he has wondered whether any of it had meaning. The sirens seem ready to answer. That promise touches something deeper than curiosity. It touches guilt. Survivors often carry questions the dead cannot answer. Why this man? Why not another? Why did you return from a battlefield where someone beside you did not? Ancient epic gives glory to warriors, but it never entirely hides the cost. The Odyssey itself is filled with absence. Heroes have died. Households have changed. Victory at Troy did not restore the world that existed before the war. Odysseus is coming home from triumph, yet almost nothing about his journey feels triumphant. The Sirens understand that contradiction, or seem to. They sing that they know everything. The word settles into him. Everything that happened at Troy. Everything occurring across the fertile earth. No temple pilgrimage is required. No sacrifice burns upon an altar. No prophet speaks in riddles. Only listen. Odysseus's breathing changes. You see his fingers curl against the mast. The ropes suddenly seem less like a precaution and more like an obstacle. The song grows richer. The meadow appears brighter. Even the bones scattered through the grass seem to recede from attention. That is another warning. Death is still there, but desire has begun making it invisible. Odysseus looks directly toward the Sirens. One spreads its wings. Sunlight catches the feathers. Another appears almost human from the waist upward. Though distance and myth make certainty impossible, their forms matter less now than their voices. One voice seems youthful, another ancient. Together, they sound as though they have been singing long before Odysseus was born and could continue long after his name has faded from living memory. Perhaps this is what immortality sounds like to a mortal, a knowledge that does not die when the person carrying it dies. The thought would have been powerful in an oral culture where memory itself preserved heroes. Before books could be copied in vast numbers, stories survived because voices carried them from one generation to another. A singer could make the dead live again for an evening. The Sirens offer something greater and darker. They claim to remember everyone. Odysseus leans forward. The rope stops him. A sailor glances toward him, through wax. The man hears nothing. He sees only his captain staring toward the shore. Odysseus catches his eye. For a moment, perhaps shame returns. He remembers the plan. He chose these restraints. He asked for this imprisonment. The sailor turns back to the oar. The ship moves closer to the island. Then the Sirens alter their song again. Troy fades. Ithaca returns. But this time it is not the Ithaca Odysseus remembers. It is Ithaca now. Or what the Sirens claim is happening there now. A palace hall? Men he does not recognize. Wine poured into cups that belong to him. Hands reaching toward possessions that belong to his household. Penelope somewhere beyond them. Telemachus standing among strangers. Odysseus freezes. Is it truth? A vision? A manipulation? He cannot know. And that uncertainty makes the song irresistible. Because now he's not listening merely to understand the past. He is listening for home. The sun glitters upon the still sea. The sailors row. The island waits. Odysseus strains against the mast for the first time with real force. The rope bites into him. And from the meadow, the voices continue gently, promising that if he listens a little longer, nothing he loves will remain hidden from him. Odysseus. The name crosses the water again. There is no mistaking it now. The Sirens know him. You feel the sound settle into the stillness around the ship, intimate and impossible, spoken with the ease of someone greeting a long-awaited guest. The sailors continue rowing because the wax protects them from the voices. To them, the morning remains silent. To Odysseus, the world has narrowed to a single invitation. Come closer. The ropes tighten as he leans toward the shore. Only a short time ago, those ropes were his own idea. He stood beside the mast while his men tested every knot. He commanded them to ignore whatever he might say once the singing began. That earlier Odysseus feels distant now. The Sirens call him the glory of the Greeks. They know Troy. They know that he survived. And beneath their praise is something more carefully chosen than flattery. Recognition. Odysseus has spent years becoming a stranger. On foreign islands, his identity has repeatedly been hidden, questioned or transformed. Before Polyphemus, he became nobody. Among unknown peoples, he has relied upon disguise and invented stories. Even the road home demands that he move through worlds where his kingship means little. The Sirens need no explanation. They know exactly who he is. That alone must feel like homecoming, yet their song does not stop at his name. It begins to unfold his past. You hear Troy again, but now with details that seem impossible. A plain beneath summer heat, bronze helmets glittering beneath the sun, the smell of dust, leather, sweat and smoke. The Scamander flowing beyond the battlefield, ships drawn onto the shore, night fires burning outside the walls while guards stare toward towers that refuse to fall. 10 years of war compressed into music. Odysseus listens. The Sirens sing of warriors he knew, men who shared food beside him, men who argued in councils, men whose bodies were carried from battle. Perhaps they sing of Achilles, the greatest warrior among the Greeks, brilliant and doomed, choosing glory despite the prophecy that glory would shorten his life. Perhaps they sing of Hector, standing before Troy knowing courage cannot guarantee survival. Perhaps they sing of Ajax, of Agamemnon, of countless ordinary men whose names epic poetry never preserved. And perhaps that is where the song becomes unbearable, because the Sirens claim to know not merely what poets remember, they know what everyone has forgotten. Odysseus pulls against the ropes. Harder now. The mast gives a low creak. One sailor looks back. He sees his captain's face transformed by concentration, but he cannot hear the song explaining why. Odysseus gestures toward the island. The sailor hesitates, then remembers. Circe's warning. Odysseus's command. Whatever I do, do not release me. The man turns back to his oar. The Sirens continue. They promise knowledge of all that happens upon the nourishing earth. It is an enormous claim. To an ancient listener, knowledge belonged in fragments. Sailors knew coastlines and stars, farmers knew soil and seasons, priests knew ritual, poets knew stories, kings relied upon messengers, travellers carried rumours between marketplaces and harbours. No mortal could see everything. The gods might. The Sirens speak as though they stand somewhere between mortal song and divine awareness. What are they? The question has never been completely answered. Some ancient traditions made them daughters of Achelous. Others connected them with the Muses or Persephone. Later storytellers added contests, punishments, transformations. Perhaps their shifting genealogy reflects how old they already were when those explanations developed. Some researchers see traces of death spirits in their bird-like forms. Others emphasize their role as embodiments of seductive knowledge. No interpretation removes the mystery entirely. Odysseus does not care about genealogy now. He wants what they know. The song moves from Troy toward Ithaca again. You see a harbour surrounded by rugged land, an olive tree, stone walls, smoke rising from houses in the evening. For a moment Odysseus's face softens. Then the palace appears. The song hints at men gathering there. Suitus. He does not yet know the full reality waiting in his household. But perhaps the Sirens offer fragments close enough to truth that he cannot dismiss them. Penelope! Her name seems woven into the melody. Odysseus jerks against the rope. His calm is breaking. Is she alive? Does she still wait? Has another man entered his home? What has become of Telemachus? The Sirens do not answer quickly. That is their genius. A complete answer might satisfy. Instead, each revelation creates another question. Knowledge becomes hunger. The more Odysseus hears, the more he needs to hear. Perhaps this is how the men in the meadow died. Not from a single overwhelming note, not from madness arriving instantly, but from one more question, one more verse, one more answer, until the voyage ceased to exist. The dead scattered through the grass become visible again as the ship moves closer. A skull lies near a cluster of flowers. The image should break the enchantment. It does not. Odysseus sees it, then looks past it toward the singers. This is the price Circe predicted. The warning has become reality. His knowledge of danger remains intact, but knowledge alone cannot overcome desire. That may have been one of the deepest lessons ancient audiences found in such stories. Wisdom is not simply knowing what is right. Human beings can recognize danger and still move toward it. That is why ritual, law, promises, and social bonds matter. Sometimes you need structures stronger than the feeling of the moment. For Odysseus, those structures are literal ropes. He twists his wrists. The fibers burn against his skin. He calls to the crew. "Untie me." The sailors cannot hear. Odysseus calls louder. Still nothing. He gestures sharply toward the knots. One sailor sees him. Their eyes meet. Odysseus commands him with the authority of a king. "Release me." The sailor's face tightens. For years, obedience has helped keep him alive. Now obedience could kill his captain. He remembers the earlier warning. "If I order you to free me, bind me tighter." The sailor rises from his bench. For one hopeful instant, Odysseus thinks he has succeeded. The siren's song swells. The sailor approaches the mast. Odysseus leans toward him. Then the man takes another rope. He wraps it around his king once, twice. He pulls. The binding becomes tighter. Odysseus's expression changes from expectation to disbelief. Then anger. The sailor returns to his place. The oars continue. The sirens call Odysseus by name again. But now another name seems to emerge beneath his own. Telemachus. Odysseus becomes perfectly still. The son he left as a baby. The child whose adult face he has never seen. The song knows him too. Perhaps the sirens are about to reveal what kind of man his son has become. Perhaps they will reveal whether father and son will ever stand together. Perhaps they know whether Odysseus reaches Ithaca at all. A chill moves through you, despite the warm air, because the temptation has changed. Odysseus no longer wants merely the secrets of Troy. He wants the future. And if the sirens truly know what lies ahead, then somewhere within their song may be the answer to the question that has driven every mile of his wandering. Will you ever return home? The ropes hold. The sailors row. The sirens sing. And Odysseus begins to beg for the freedom he once ordered his companions never to give him. The name of Telemachus fades into the melody before the sirens give Odysseus the answer he wants. That unfinished promise is almost crueler than silence. He strains against the ropes, listening for the name again, but the song turns away from Ithaca. The voices seem to retreat into an older memory, drawing him backward across the years until the still sea around you disappears beneath another landscape. Troy returns, not the ruined city left behind after victory. Troy alive, you see its walls beneath the afternoon sun, massive stone defences rising above the plain. Beyond them stand towers, houses, sanctuaries, palace halls, storerooms, courtyards, and streets where generations have lived beneath the protection of kings. Smoke rises from cooking fires. Animals move through narrow lanes. Somewhere inside a temple, oil lamps flicker before the image of a god. The city does not yet know how its story ends. Odysseus does. That difference gives the vision its melancholy. The sirens sing of the beginning. Ships arriving along the coast. Thousands of Greeks stepping onto foreign soil. Bright shields. Bronze spearheads. Standards moving in the wind. Men believing they will return home after victory. Then seasons begin passing. Summer dust becomes winter mud. Ships weather beside the shore. Armor is repaired. The dead are buried. More men die. You can almost smell the camp. Wood smoke. Sweat. Salt. Blood. Roasting meat from sacrifice. Wine poured upon the ground for gods whose intentions remain difficult to understand. Odysseus listens without blinking. Perhaps the sirens sing of things he never knew. Conversations behind Trojan walls. Prayers offered by mothers. Arguments among commanders when he was absent. Private fears hidden beneath heroic language. This is what makes their knowledge so dangerous. They can fill the gaps in memory. Every survivor carries gaps. You remember what you saw, you remember what others told you, but there are always rooms you never entered. Words spoken after you left. Choices made beyond your sight. The sirens promise to open every closed door. Odysseus pulls against the rope again. His wrists ache. The sailors continue rowing. To them, the captain is struggling against nothing. The contrast is almost dreamlike. They see sunlight, water, an island. Their king bound to a mast. Odysseus sees 10 years of war. The song leads him toward the night Troy fell. Torches glow. Shadows move beneath walls. The wooden horse stands within the city. The object that represents perhaps the greatest triumph of cunning in Greek legend also carries a darker truth. Victory required deception. Odysseus's gift was never simple. He survives because he can manipulate appearances, but living through deception may leave a man wondering whether anything around him can be trusted. Now the Sirens offer certainty. They claim to know the truth beneath every appearance. Perhaps that is why their promise reaches him so deeply. You hear the crackle of imagined flames. Troy burns. Roof beams collapse. Bronze catches firelight. Men run through smoke. Women cry out in palace corridors. Temples that once seemed protected by divine presence become places of fear. The song does not celebrate. It remembers. And memory without distance can become unbearable. Odysseus closes his eyes. For a moment, his resistance stops. He is listening now not as a king, not as a strategist, but as a man who has survived something enormous. What did victory cost? The Sirens seem ready to tell him. Perhaps they know which deaths were inevitable. Perhaps they know which could have been avoided. Perhaps they know whether the gods truly demanded the war's suffering or whether mortals merely placed divine names over their own choices. Ancient audiences would have recognized the weight of such questions. Greek epic rarely presents war as simple glory. Honor and grief live beside one another. Even victorious heroes return carrying consequences. Agamemnon will return to a palace where death waits. Menelaus will wander before reaching home. Ajax is gone. Achilles is dead. Odysseus still sails. Victory did not end the story. It scattered everyone into new tragedies. A dark cloud passes before the sun again. The island dims. The Sirens continue singing. The cloud resembles the one that crossed above the ship earlier. But now its appearance feels more deliberate. An omen repeated becomes harder to dismiss. One sailor notices it and cannot hear the voices, but he looks toward the sky, then toward Odysseus. The captain's face is wet. Sweat, perhaps, or tears. The sailor cannot know. Neither can you be certain. Homer does not describe Odysseus weeping before the Sirens. Yet elsewhere in the Odyssey, he is not a hero without tears. He mourns, he longs. He sits beside the sea and suffers. There is no contradiction between endurance and grief. The Sirens may understand that better than any enemy he has faced. They do not attack his strength. They sing to his wounds. Then the melody shifts. A voice seems to ask a question. Do you wish to know why you survived? Odysseus opens his eyes. The ropes tighten as his body moves forward. There it is. The question beneath all the others. Why did Achilles die while Odysseus lived? Why did companions disappear while he remained? Why did one ship continue when others were destroyed? Fate, skill, divine favor, chance. The ancient Greeks possessed the concept of Moira, the portion or fate allotted to a person. Yet mythology repeatedly explores how human choices interact with what has been destined. No simple system resolves every story. That uncertainty gives fate its emotional power. Odysseus knows prophecies. He knows gods intervene, but he also knows his own decisions have consequences. Polyphemus's curse followed his pride. Circe's warning protects him now because he chose to obey it. Where does fate end and choice begin? The Sirens promise an answer. Odysseus calls to the crew again. His voice is louder now. Release me! The men cannot hear. He commands. He pleads. He jerks his head toward the island. A sailor looks back. Odysseus points toward the ropes. The sailor remembers the promise. He rows harder. The ship advances. The Sirens' voices become clearer as the distance narrows. But the island also begins moving slowly toward the side of the ship rather than directly ahead. They are passing it. Not quickly, but they are passing. Odysseus does not seem to notice. His world is Troy. The song shows him faces, perhaps Achilles, perhaps Patroclus, perhaps men whose names have vanished from every surviving poem. Then one face appears that he cannot place. A young warrior, dead beneath the walls. Who was he? Why does the song show him? Odysseus listens desperately for an explanation. None comes. Another mystery. Another question. Another reason to remain. Perhaps this is the Sirens' true art. Not answers, the promise of answers. The bones in their meadow belong to men who believed the next verse would finally make everything clear. The ship continues forward. The dark cloud moves away. Sunlight returns across the water. Troy begins fading from the song. But before the vision disappears, the Sirens offer one final image. Odysseus sees himself standing inside the fallen city, older than the man who entered the war, alive among the dead. Then the image dissolves. A different landscape begins forming in its place. Rocky hills, olive trees, a familiar harbour, Ithaca. The Sirens have finished singing about what Odysseus cannot change. Now they're turning toward what he fears he may still lose. The image of Troy disappears slowly, not like a dream ending at dawn, not like a memory fading with age. It dissolves like mist above the sea, leaving behind traces that are impossible to grasp. The burning towers, the fallen warriors, the faces of men whose lives ended beneath foreign walls, all of it retreats into the Sirens' voices until only one thing remains. Home, Ithaca. Odysseus sees it, or believes he sees it. The island rises from the song like a place untouched by time. Green hills descend toward the sea. Olive trees move beneath a gentle breeze. Stone paths lead upward toward familiar walls. The harbour waits exactly as memory preserved it. But memory is not always a faithful guide. That is the danger. The Sirens do not need to create a false image. They only need to take the things Odysseus loves most and arrange them into a vision he cannot resist. The song continues. It tells him that he has suffered enough. The storms, the monsters, the years of separation, the deaths of companions, all of it can finally be understood. All he must do is listen. The ropes around his body become unbearable. You can see the struggle in him. This is not the fear of a warrior facing an enemy. Odysseus has faced blades. He has faced giants. He has faced creatures whose size alone could frighten ordinary men into surrender. But this is different. The Sirens do not make him want to escape danger. They make him want to move toward it. The mast holds him in place. His greatest enemy is not outside the ship. It is the desire within him. He pulls again. The wood groans. The rope cuts deeper into his clothing. A sailor turns at the movement. Through the wax. The man cannot hear the desperate voice of his king. He only sees a figure bound against the mast, reaching toward an unseen shore. The sailor's expression changes. Concern, confusion, fear. For a moment he begins to rise. Odysseus sees him. Hope flashes across his face. He gestures violently. The meaning seems obvious. Release me. The sailor steps closer. The Sirens' voices grow softer, almost comforting. Perhaps they know this is the most dangerous moment. Not when Odysseus first hears them. Not when he remembers Troy. Not when he sees Ithaca. But when another person approaches with the power to end his suffering. The sailor reaches the mast. Odysseus leans forward as far as the ropes allow. His eyes plead. The sailor places his hand upon the rope. And then he remembers. The command. The warning. The promise. Before the song began. Odysseus had looked each man in the face and asked them for this impossible loyalty. Do not trust my future words. Trust the man who speaks before the danger arrives. The sailor's hand moves. Not to untie, to tighten. Another rope wraps around Odysseus. Then another. The sailor pulls with all his strength. Odysseus cries out. The sound is full of anger now. Not because the sailor betrayed him, because the sailor obeyed. This is perhaps one of the most painful moments in the entire voyage. Odysseus is saved by the very thing he is fighting against. The crew's refusal, their disobedience, their ability to value his earlier wisdom above his current desire. Ancient Greek audiences would have understood the importance of such a moment. A hero's greatness often depended upon allies, companions, and relationships. Even the strongest warrior could not survive alone. The Odyssey is filled with this idea. Odysseus escapes the Cyclops because his companions help move the enormous stone and hide beneath the sheep. He survives storms because sailors hold the ship together. He returns toward Ithaca because others continue rowing even when hope disappears. The hero is never completely alone. The mast becomes a symbol of that truth. Bound to it, Odysseus is forced to admit something he rarely accepts. His own mind can betray him. The sirens continue. Their voices become more beautiful. Perhaps they sense his resistance weakening. They change their approach. They stop speaking of glory. They stop speaking of Troy. They speak of peace, a place where no struggle remains. No storms, no enemies, no uncertainty, only understanding. For a man exhausted by years of suffering, that promise may be even more powerful than knowledge. Odysseus has spent so long fighting to survive. What if survival itself is the burden? What if the song offers not death but rest? This is another mystery within the myth. Are the sirens truly evil? Ancient stories rarely make them simple. They are dangerous, certainly. Their island is surrounded by the remains of the dead. But their temptation works because they offer something humans genuinely desire. To be known, to understand, to stop struggling. Perhaps the sirens represent the moments when surrender feels like peace. The sun moves higher. The ship passes closer to the island than any safe sailor would choose. The bones on the shore become clearer. The meadow is behind them now. The voices still reach, but the distance has changed. The sirens are no longer approaching. They are being left behind. Odysseus does not know this yet. He still believes he is trapped forever between the song and the ropes. He continues struggling. The sailors continue rowing. One man looks toward the horizon. Another watches the captain. No one speaks. Then suddenly the water changes. The ship enters a stronger current. The island begins drifting behind them. The song remains, but its power weakens. Not because the sirens choose to stop, because distance is returning. The world expands again. The sea becomes larger. The horizon opens. The spell begins breaking. Odysseus notices. His movements slow. His breathing changes. The ropes are still tight, but he's no longer fighting with the same desperation. Perhaps he understands. Perhaps he is ashamed. Perhaps he's simply exhausted. The sirens' final words reach him like a fading dream. They promise that they could have shown him everything. Everything he wanted. Everything he feared. Everything he lost. But the ship continues. And for the first time in many years, Odysseus leaves behind a place where he could have remained forever. The island disappears into morning mist. The sailors keep rowing. The wax remains in their ears. The ropes remain around their captain. And the man who once believed he could overcome every danger through intelligence alone now learns a quieter lesson. Sometimes survival does not come from defeating temptation. Sometimes survival comes from trusting someone else to hold you back. The sea wind returns. A gentle breeze touches the sail. The ship moves forward. Behind you, the sirens become only a memory. But the question remains, what exactly did Odysseus hear? What truths did the song reveal? And why does the ancient poem leave some answers hidden beneath the waves? The island disappears behind the mist. For a while, no one aboard the ship moves. The sailors continue rowing because they know they must. But the rhythm feels different now. The danger has passed. Yet the body does not immediately understand that it is safe. Muscles remain tense. Hands remain tight around oars. Eyes continue searching the water for something unseen. The sirens are behind you, but the memory of their presence remains. Odysseus hangs against the mast, exhausted. The ropes that saved him now feel heavy. The wood beneath his back is rough and unforgiving. His wrists ache. His chest rises and falls slowly as the last traces of the song disappear into the distance. For the first time since approaching the island, he is no longer fighting. He looks toward the crew. They are still wearing the wax. They do not know what happened. They know only what they witnessed. Their captain heard something. Their captain struggled. Their captain begged. And they refused. A strange silence exists between them. Not the silence created by wax. A human silence. The kind that appears after a moment when everyone understands that something important has happened, but no one knows how to speak about it. Eventually, Odysseus gestures. Remove the wax. The sailors look toward one another. Then slowly, carefully, they obey. The first man presses his fingers to his ear and pulls away the softened wax. He blinks as the world returns. The sea, the wind, the voices of his companions, the creaking of the ship, all of it returns at once. Perhaps the first sound he hears is his own breathing. Perhaps the first words are a question. What happened? But Odysseus does not answer immediately. He looks back. The island is already becoming smaller, a dark shape beneath the morning sky. Whatever secrets the Sirens possessed remain there. For now, the sailors remove the wax from their ears one by one. Their expressions change as they regain their senses. Some laugh quietly, relieved to hear again. Others remain serious. They have survived many impossible things, but survival does not make every experience easier to understand. One sailor approaches Odysseus. He looks at the marks left by the ropes. Then he looks toward the vanished island. "What did you hear?" The question hangs between them. Odysseus does not respond. Perhaps he cannot. Perhaps no words are enough. This is one of the most fascinating mysteries of the episode. Homer tells you that Odysseus heard the sirens, but he never provides a complete account of the song itself. The exact words are limited. The experience remains partly hidden. Why? Some scholars believe the mystery is intentional. The power of the sirens depends upon imagination. If their song were fully described, it would become ordinary, by leaving it incomplete. The poem allows every listener to wonder what temptation would be impossible for them to resist. Another interpretation suggests that the silence reflects the private nature of certain experiences. Some moments change a person so deeply that explanation becomes inadequate. Odysseus may have learned something that belongs only to him. The sailor waits. Finally, Odysseus speaks. Not about everything, not about every vision, only enough. He tells them the plan worked. He tells them they saved his life. The men look surprised. A king thanking ordinary sailors is not an insignificant thing. In the ancient world, hierarchy mattered deeply. Kings, warriors, farmers, craftsmen, and sailors each occupied different places within society. Yet epic stories often reveal moments when greatness depends upon those whose names history forgets. The sailors are not famous. They will not have temples built for them. Poets will not sing their individual names. But without them, Odysseus would never reach Ithaca. The crew returns to the oars. The voyage continues. The sea appears ordinary again. That may be the strangest part. After monsters and gods, after islands of magic and voices that promise impossible knowledge, the world returns to simple things: water, wood, wind, human effort. Perhaps this is why the Sirens episode has survived for so long. It does not only ask how to defeat a monster, it asks how to live with temptation. Every person carries some version of the Sirens, a voice promising certainty, a memory promising escape, a desire offering a world where pain disappears. The Greeks placed such ideas into myths because they understood that danger does not always arrive looking dangerous. Sometimes it arrives beautifully. The ship moves onward, but Odysseus is changed, not transformed into someone completely different. He remains curious. He remains ambitious. He remains the man who wants answers, yet something within him has shifted. He has experienced a danger he could not overcome alone. His cleverness created the plan, but the crew made the plan succeed. The distinction matters. Even Odysseus's greatest victory required trust. As the afternoon approaches, clouds gather far ahead. The sea begins changing again. The sailors notice. They have barely escaped one danger before another approaches. This is the pattern of the journey. The road home is never a straight path. Every answer reveals another question. Every shore hides another challenge. Circe warned them. The Sirens were only one part of what waited beyond Aia. Soon they will face the narrow passage where Scylla and Charybdis threaten the ship. Soon Odysseus will have to make another impossible choice. The Sirens taught him that knowledge has a price. The next trial will teach him something even harder. Sometimes knowing what will happen does not allow you to prevent it. The sun begins descending. Golden light spreads across the waves. Odysseus rests near the mast, his eyes fixed upon the horizon. Perhaps he thinks of Ithaca. Perhaps he thinks of the song. Perhaps he wonders whether the Sirens truly knew the future, or only understood the deepest fears hidden inside every human heart. No one aboard can answer. The island is gone. The voices are gone. Only memory remains, and memory, like the sea, carries things farther than anyone expects. The ship sails onward, leaving the Sirens behind. Yet the strange thing about certain encounters is that distance does not always remove their presence. The island has vanished beneath the horizon, the meadow, the bones, the winged figures, and the impossible voices have disappeared into the same vast sea that hides so many mysteries of the ancient world. But Odysseus carries the song with him. You can see it in the way he watches the water. Before the Sirens, he looked ahead because he wanted Ithaca. After the Sirens, he looks ahead because he is trying to understand what he experienced. The difference is subtle, but it matters. For years, Odysseus has searched for a road home. Now he's encountered something that offered another kind of journey, a journey inward. The Sirens did not simply call him toward their island. They called him toward the unanswered questions he carried inside himself. Why did Troy happen? Why did so many men die? Why did he survive? Why do the gods help one person and abandon another? Why does fate allow suffering? These are not the questions of a sailor trying to find a safe harbour. They are the questions of a mortal trying to understand his place beneath the heavens. And perhaps that is why the Sirens were so dangerous. They offered the one thing Odysseus had always desired. Not treasure, not power, not even victory. Understanding. You remember the moment when he first heard his name. The Sirens did not call him by his title alone. They didn't call him king. They called him Odysseus, the man beneath the armour, the survivor beneath the reputation. That distinction is important because ancient Greek heroes were often caught between two worlds. They wanted lasting glory, the kind poets would preserve after death. Yet they also wanted ordinary human joys, family, peace, meals shared beside familiar fires. Odysseus has spent years caught between those desires. The warrior who left Ithaca is not the same man trying to return. The Sirens understood that, or at least they appeared to. Perhaps that was the greatest illusion. They seemed to know everything because they knew what he most needed someone to know. The human heart. The ship moves beneath a changing sky. The calm waters around the Sirens' island have given way to stronger currents. Wind returns gradually, first as a gentle movement against the sail, then as a steady force carrying the ship forward. The sailors welcome it. After the unnatural silence, ordinary wind feels almost comforting. You hear the familiar sounds again. The sail snapping overhead, the ropes pulling tight, the water breaking against the hull, the voices of men speaking freely. The world has returned, yet one question remains. Did Odysseus truly hear the truth? Ancient audiences would have debated this. Some might have imagined the Sirens as creatures with genuine prophetic knowledge, beings who possessed a view of the world beyond ordinary human limits. Others might have seen them as symbols of temptation, voices that do not reveal reality but reshape it according to desire. Another interpretation suggests that the Sirens represent poetry itself. This idea is especially interesting. A poet preserves the memory of heroes, battles, and forgotten generations. A singer can bring the past alive through words. The Sirens, too, sing about everything that has happened, but their song is dangerous because it does not lead you onward. The true poet helps memory survive. The Sirens trap you inside memory. The difference is movement. A story should carry you somewhere. The Sirens' song asks you to remain. Perhaps that is why the ancient warning feels so timeless. There are moments when looking backward becomes easier than continuing forward. Odysseus knows this. He has lost friends. He has lost years. He has lost the simple certainty of the man he was before Troy. The past can become a beautiful prison. The ship continues westward. Night approaches again. The sailors prepare food. A small fire burns carefully upon the deck. Protected from the wind, the smell of roasted grain and olive oil spreads through the air. After everything supernatural, the ordinary act of eating together feels almost sacred. Odysseus sits among them. Perhaps the crew treats him differently now. Not because he failed, because they witnessed his humanity. A hero who never struggles feels distant. A hero who admits weakness becomes recognizable. The Greeks did not tell stories of perfect men. They told stories of people standing between greatness and failure. Achilles had unmatched strength but could not escape anger. Agamemnon commanded armies but could not escape pride. Odysseus possessed extraordinary intelligence but could not escape curiosity. The Sirens episode reveals that his greatest gift and greatest weakness are connected. The mind that solves impossible problems is the same mind that wants impossible answers. The sea darkens. Stars appear overhead. The sailors sleep in shifts. Odysseus remains awake. Perhaps he wonders whether Penelope would believe him if he described the island. Perhaps he wonders whether the song revealed something true about Ithaca. Perhaps he wonders whether the Sirens knew that he would survive all along. That final possibility is unsettling. If they knew he would escape, why sing? If they did not know, how could they understand him so perfectly? The mystery remains, and perhaps it should. The greatest myths do not close every door. They leave a small opening where imagination can continue walking. The next morning will bring another danger. Circe's warnings are not finished. The sea still hides monsters. The gods still watch. Fate still waits. But tonight, for this brief moment, Odysseus and his companions have passed through one of the most unusual trials of their journey. They defeated the Sirens without silencing them. They survived without destroying them. They escaped because a man who wanted knowledge accepted that he needed restraint. The ropes have been removed. The wax is gone. But the lesson remains. Sometimes the strongest person is not the one who can resist every temptation. Sometimes the strongest person is the one who knows exactly which temptations require help. The ship moves beneath the stars. The island of the Sirens is gone. The song has faded, yet somewhere beyond memory, beyond maps, beyond the edge of the known sea, those voices continue, waiting, singing, calling to every traveller who believes the next answer might finally explain everything. The night passes quietly after the Sirens, for the first time in many days. The crew sleeps without expecting immediate disaster. The ship moves beneath a calmer sky, carried by winds that feel ordinary again. No strange silence surrounds you. No impossible fragrance drifts across the waves. No hidden island waits within the mist, and yet everyone aboard knows something has changed. The sailors are alive because they followed a command given before the danger arrived. Odysseus is alive because he trusted others with his weakness. That is not a small thing for a man like him. You have followed Odysseus long enough to understand that he is accustomed to carrying responsibility alone. At Troy, he was valued because he could find solutions when others saw only walls and impossible odds. Among kings and warriors, his mind became his greatest weapon. But the Sirens revealed a truth that no battlefield could teach. A person can be defeated by the very qualities that make him extraordinary. His curiosity almost trapped him. His desire for knowledge almost ended his journey. Yet the same intelligence that brought him toward danger also allowed him to prepare for it. The morning after the encounter, the sailors speak more freely. They ask questions. What did you hear? Were the voices truly beautiful? Did the Siren speak your name? Odysseus listens. Perhaps he wants to answer. Perhaps part of him wants to describe every detail, to transform the experience into words and make it manageable. But some memories resist explanation. The crew notices his silence. They do not press him. There is respect in that. Ancient Greek culture placed great importance on storytelling, but it also understood that certain experiences belong to the person who endured them. Warriors returned from battle carrying memories that could not be fully transferred to those who waited at home. The Sirens have created another kind of battlefield. No blood was spilled. No weapon was raised. Yet Odysseus returns from it changed. The sea continues. The ship follows the path Circe warned them about. Ahead waits another passage, one that no clever speech can solve, one that no rope can completely prevent. Scylla and Charybdis. Even before they arrive, the atmosphere begins to change. The waters become narrower. The coastline rises. Dark cliffs appear in the distance, their peaks covered with mist. The open horizon that once surrounded the ship begins to close around you. The sea feels older here, more enclosed. The waves move differently against the rocks. You can hear distant echoes, perhaps birds hidden among cliffs, perhaps the wind moving through narrow stone passages, perhaps something else. The sailors grow quieter. They have learned that silence sometimes arrives before danger. Odysseus remembers Circe's warning. A goddess's words are not easily forgotten after they have already saved your life once. The memory of the Sirens gives her prophecy new weight. She knew. She knew about the island. She knew about the ropes. She knew the danger waiting beyond the song. So perhaps she knows this too. Perhaps every warning ahead is another step already placed upon the path. This creates one of the deepest mysteries of Odysseus's voyage. If the future can be predicted, how much freedom do mortals truly possess? Greek mythology often returns to this question. A prophecy may reveal what will happen, but the choices made along the way still matter. Oedipus attempts to avoid his fate and unknowingly moves toward it. Achilles knows that glory and death are connected, yet he chooses the path that gives his life meaning. Odysseus receives warnings too, but warnings do not remove the need to choose. The ship moves closer to the narrow waters. The crew prepares. Weapons are checked, oars are secured. The men know something approaches, but they do not know exactly what. Perhaps this is why the Sirens remain such a powerful memory. At least with the Sirens, Odysseus knew the method of survival. The plan existed before danger arrived. Here the future is less forgiving. Circe told him there would be loss. Not every man could be saved. The knowledge weighs heavily. A leader carries a painful burden when he knows something his companions do not. Odysseus has already done this once. He knew the danger of the Sirens. Now he knows that another trial waits, and somewhere within him, perhaps he wonders whether he has the right to lead others into dangers he cannot eliminate. That question would have mattered deeply to ancient audiences. Heroes are admired for courage, but courage alone is not enough. A king must carry responsibility. A commander must make decisions that affect lives beyond his own. Odysseus's journey is not simply about survival. It is about the cost of survival. The sun lowers behind mountains. Mist gathers over the cliffs. The sea below darkens from blue to deep green. Then a sound reaches the ship. Not a song. Not a voice. A roar. The sailors freeze. The sound rolls through the narrow waters like distant thunder. Another sound answers. A violent pull beneath the waves. The sea itself seems to move. The men look toward Odysseus. He does not speak immediately, because now he understands something painful. The Sirens offered knowledge, but knowledge did not save him from the next danger. It only prepared him to face it. The ship enters the shadow of the cliffs. Above, birds circle around dark stone. Below, the water churns. Somewhere ahead waits the monster with many heads. Somewhere else waits the whirlpool that can swallow the sea. And behind them, far beyond sight, the Sirens' island becomes only a memory. The crew rows harder. Odysseus stands at the front of the ship. The ropes are gone. The wax is gone. Now he must face the next trial without either. The sea wind rises. The cliffs close around you. And the prophecy of Circe continues. The cliffs rise higher as the ship moves deeper into the narrow waters. The open sea has disappeared behind you. Now stone surrounds the vessel on both sides, ancient and silent beneath a sky turning gold with the approaching evening. Mist clings to the mountain walls. Shadows gather in the valleys above. The air feels colder here, carrying the scent of wet rock and distant storms. The sailors row carefully. No one speaks loudly. They have learned that voices can attract danger. The memory of the Sirens is still fresh. Only a short time ago, they sailed through a place where sound itself was the enemy. Now they enter a place where the sea and stone appear to be waiting. Odysseus stands near the bow. He remembers Circe's words. She had warned him that this passage could not be crossed without suffering. One side held Scylla, the terrible creature hidden among the cliffs. The other held Charybdis, the enormous force that swallowed and released the sea. There was no perfect path, no clever trick, no victory without cost. This truth separates the trial ahead from the Sirens. The Sirens could be escaped through preparation. This danger must be endured. Perhaps that is why the Sirens remain in his thoughts. Their song promised that every mystery could be answered. But now Odysseus faces a reality that knowledge cannot change. Sometimes knowing what waits ahead only makes the choice heavier. The ship moves forward. The men grip their oars. Then the water begins to pull. At first it is subtle, a slight movement beneath the hull, a strange current dragging the ship sideways. The sailors adjust their strokes, but the force grows stronger. The sea begins twisting. Charybdis. The name itself carries fear. Ancient Greek audiences imagine this being not simply as a monster, but as a terrible natural force given a living form. In later traditions, Charybdis becomes associated with a massive whirlpool, a place where the sea itself seems to open and consume anything nearby. The Greeks lived beside the ocean. They respected its generosity. They also feared its power. The sea provided fish, trade routes, and connections between distant islands. But storms, currents, and hidden rocks could destroy ships within moments. To transform such dangers into mythology was a way of giving shape to forces humans could not control. The water pulls harder. The ship tilts. Men shout. Odysseus looks toward the opposite cliff. Scylla. He sees nothing at first. Only darkness. Only stone. Only mist. Then movement. Something shifts above. The sailors notice too. Panic spreads. But Odysseus remembers. Circe warned him, "Do not stop to fight. Do not attempt to challenge Scylla." The advice is painful because it goes against everything heroic culture teaches. A warrior should confront enemies. A hero should stand against monsters. But sometimes survival requires accepting that not every battle can be won. This is a different kind of wisdom. The wisdom of knowing what cannot be changed. The ship moves closer. The cliffs seem to lean over the water. Then Scylla appears. Not all at once. A shape, a shadow, a movement between rocks. Ancient descriptions of Scylla vary. As many mythological creatures do, later traditions imagine a monstrous being with multiple heads, surrounded by barking dogs and serpent-like forms. Earlier versions may have been simpler, representing the terrifying unpredictability of dangerous waters. Whatever form she takes, the meaning remains. There are dangers that wait beyond human control. Odysseus grips his weapon. The instinct to fight returns. The same instinct that carried Greek warriors into battle. The same instinct that made heroes famous. But he remembers the Sirens. He remembers the ropes. He remembers what happens when desire overrides wisdom. The sea roars. Scylla reaches downward. The sailors scream. 6 men disappear. There is no heroic battle. No chance for rescue. No time for revenge. One moment they are rowing beside their companions. The next, they are gone. Odysseus watches, and something inside him breaks. The Sirens had offered him knowledge of everything, but no song could prepare him for this. No prophecy could make loss easier. The men cry out. Their voices vanish into the cliffs. The ship continues, because it must. That may be the cruelest part of the voyage. A leader sometimes survives not because he saves everyone, but because he carries the memory of those he could not save. The ship escapes the passage. The waters become calmer. The cliffs begin fading behind them. No one celebrates. No one speaks of victory. The survivors sit with the absence beside them. Odysseus looks back. The place where Scylla waited is already hidden by mist. Another danger survived. Another group of companions lost. And perhaps this is the answer hidden beneath the Sirens' song. Knowledge cannot protect you from grief. Understanding cannot bring back the dead. Even the wisest person in the world must still experience loss. The evening sky darkens. Stars begin appearing above the ship. The sailors prepare for another night. Odysseus remains awake. He remembers every face, every name, every man who left Troy but never reached Ithaca. The ancient Greeks understood this kind of sorrow deeply. Epic poetry preserved heroes, but it also preserved mourning. Glory without memory was empty. A person lived on through the stories told by those who remembered. The men lost to Scylla will not receive great monuments. But Odysseus remembers them, and perhaps that is another form of immortality. The ship continues. Ahead waits another warning from Circe, the cattle of Helios, another sacred boundary, another temptation. But for now, the sea is quiet. Odysseus sits beneath the stars. The Sirens' voices are gone. The cliffs are behind him. Yet the lessons remain. A person can prepare for danger. A person can survive temptation. A person can make every correct decision and still lose something precious. The journey home is not a path where every hardship disappears. It is a path where the traveller learns how to continue carrying what cannot be recovered. The wind moves gently across the water. The ship sails onward, and Odysseus, who once sought answers from the Sirens, now carries a truth they never promised to reveal. The price of returning home is sometimes remembering everyone who could not. The night after Scylla passes slowly. No one aboard the ship sleeps deeply. The men who remain alive lie beneath their cloaks, but their rest is interrupted by memories. The sea is calmer now, yet calm water does not always bring peace. Sometimes silence allows the mind to return to places it would rather avoid. Odysseus understands this. He sits near the stern, looking into the darkness behind the ship. Somewhere far away, beyond the horizon, lies the island of the Sirens. He cannot see it. He cannot hear them. Yet their presence remains. That is the strange power of certain moments. They end physically, but they continue inside the person who experienced them. The Siren's song has faded from the world, but it has not faded completely from Odysseus. Perhaps this is why he remains awake. The crew sees a captain who survived, but Odysseus knows survival is not the same as victory. He escaped the song. He passed the island. He reached the other side. Yet something about the encounter follows him. What did the Sirens know? What was real? What was illusion? The questions return. Ancient audiences would have recognized this uncertainty. Greek mythology often places mortals in situations where knowledge is incomplete. Heroes rarely receive perfect explanations. They move forward carrying fragments, interpretations, and memories. Even the gods do not always reveal everything. The future remains partly hidden. The sea stretches before Odysseus. The stars above seem endless. In ancient Greek thought, the heavens were not simply an empty space, they were a realm connected with divine order, with constellations carrying stories of heroes, creatures, and transformations. Sailors looked upward for guidance, finding familiar patterns in an unfamiliar darkness. Perhaps Odysseus looks toward those stars now. Perhaps he wonders whether his own story has already been written among them. Fate, that word has followed him from Troy, from the prophecies of heroes, from the warnings of gods, from the curse of Polyphemus, from Circe's instructions, from the Sirens' song. Yet fate in Greek mythology is rarely simple. It does not remove human choice. Odysseus still chose to enter the Cyclops' cave. He still chose to reveal his name. He still chose to hear the Sirens. But he also chose to prepare. He chose to trust his crew. He chose to continue. Perhaps destiny is not a road built entirely before a person begins walking. Perhaps it is the path created through countless decisions made under uncertainty. The next morning, the sailors speak quietly about the Sirens. Some ask whether the island was truly behind them. Others wonder whether they imagined the strange calm. One older sailor says little. He has learned that some experiences are better respected than explained. Odysseus listens. Then he says something simple. They survived because everyone remembered his command. The men look at him. They understand what he means. The Sirens were not defeated by one man alone. The victory belonged to the crew, the wax, the ropes, the promise, the trust. This is unusual for epic stories because ancient heroes often stand above ordinary people. Their names survive, their actions become legends. Yet the Odyssey repeatedly returns to cooperation. The cleverest person still requires others. A king still needs sailors. A warrior still needs companions. A hero still needs someone willing to hold the rope. The thought brings a quiet sadness, because many of those companions are gone. The ship carries fewer voices now. Every empty place on the deck has become a memory. The journey home is not simply about reaching Ithaca. It is about discovering what remains of the person who left. Odysseus once sailed away as a powerful king and warrior. He returns as a man shaped by loss. The Sirens understood the longing within him. They offered a world where every mystery could be solved, but perhaps the greatest mystery was not outside him. It was the question of who he would become after everything he endured. The ship continues. The sea wind grows stronger. The coastline changes. Ahead, another island appears in the distance. The men know another challenge may wait. But something has changed since the Sirens. They no longer believe survival comes only from their captain's cleverness. They have seen his weakness, and strangely, that has made their loyalty stronger. A leader who never struggles may inspire admiration. A leader who struggles and trusts others may inspire devotion. As evening arrives, Odysseus once again looks back toward the empty horizon. He cannot see the Sirens, he cannot hear their voices, but he remembers their promise. Everything known, everything hidden, everything desired. The temptation remains powerful because it was not entirely false. The Sirens offered something humans have always wanted: an explanation, a final answer, a complete understanding of why life unfolds the way it does. But Odysseus learned that some answers are not worth the cost. A person can become so focused on understanding existence that he forgets to live it. The ship moves beneath the stars. The sea carries him onward, and slowly, quietly, the song becomes only a memory. Not a command, not a temptation. A memory. Perhaps that is the true escape. Not forgetting the Sirens, not destroying them, but allowing their song to become part of the past rather than the force controlling the future. The island is gone. The voices are gone. The ropes are gone. And Odysseus continues toward home. Morning arrives softly over the sea. The darkness of the previous night disappears slowly, replaced by a pale silver horizon and the first warm light touching the waves. The ship moves steadily forward, carried by a gentle wind that feels almost like a gift after so many days of uncertainty. The sailors are awake early. Perhaps they sleep less now. A journey like theirs changes the way a person rests. Even when the sea is calm, the memory of danger remains close. A sudden sound, a strange shadow, or an unexpected change in the wind can bring back every island, every storm, every voice that almost ended their voyage. Yet this morning feels different. They are alive. The Sirens are behind them, and for the first time, the men begin to understand the full meaning of what happened. They did not merely pass a dangerous place. They crossed a test of trust. The wax was the first protection. The ropes were the second. But the most important defense was a promise. Before the danger arrived, Odysseus asked them to remember a future moment when he would no longer be able to make the right decision. He knew that the man struggling against the ropes would not be the same man who gave the command. That realization contains a quiet wisdom. Human beings often believe they can judge themselves clearly in every moment. They imagine that knowing the right path means they will naturally follow it. But the Greeks understood something more complicated. A person can possess wisdom and still be vulnerable. A person can know danger and still move toward it. A person can understand a temptation and still desire it. This is why rituals, laws, friendships, and promises mattered so deeply in ancient societies. They created structures stronger than temporary emotion. Odysseus created such a structure with rope and trust. Now, as the crew begins removing the wax from their ears completely, the world returns. A sailor presses his fingers against his ear. The wax has softened from the warmth of his body. He removes it carefully. At first, sound returns strangely. The sea is louder than expected. The wind feels sharper. The voices of his companions sound almost unfamiliar. After hours of silence, ordinary sounds become precious. A man laughs quietly. Another speaks his name. Someone taps the side of the ship simply to hear the sound. Small things become meaningful. Perhaps this is one of the hidden lessons of the Sirens. The things we ignore in ordinary life may become the things we miss most when they disappear. The sailors remove the wax from one another's ears. They look at each other. They survived, but their faces carry questions. Eventually, one asks Odysseus again, what did they say? This time, the captain does not immediately turn away. The memory is still close. The song, the voices, the feeling of being known by something beyond human understanding. He looks toward the sea before answering. Perhaps he tells them the Sirens knew Troy. Perhaps he tells them they promise knowledge. Perhaps he says only that their song was unlike anything he'd ever heard. No one can know the exact conversation. The poem does not preserve it, and the absence creates another mystery. Why would Homer describe the danger of the Sirens but leave the song itself mostly hidden? Perhaps because the song is not meant to belong only to Odysseus. It belongs to every listener. Everyone has a different siren, a different voice that promises something impossible to refuse. For one person, it may be knowledge. For another, power. For another, memory. For another, the hope of returning to a moment that can never truly return. The Sirens remain powerful because they are not simply creatures on an island. They are an image of desire itself. The ship continues. The sailors return to their duties. Ropes are checked. Food is prepared. The ordinary rhythm of travel resumes. But something subtle has changed between Odysseus and his companions. Before the Sirens, they followed him because he was clever. After the Sirens, they follow him because he trusted them. That difference is difficult to measure. Yet it transforms leadership. A commander who demands obedience creates followers. A leader who admits vulnerability creates companions. The crew may never fully understand what Odysseus heard, but they understand what he asked them to do, and they understand that he trusted them with his life. The afternoon passes. The sea stretches endlessly around the ship. Far behind them, the Sirens' island becomes another point lost among countless waves. Perhaps the Sirens continue singing. Perhaps they wait for another ship. Perhaps they have always been waiting. The ancient stories never tell you, and perhaps that is appropriate. A mystery that disappears completely loses some of its power. The unknown remains part of the ocean. As evening arrives, Odysseus stands alone for a while. The mast beside him no longer holds ropes. It is simply wood again. A piece of the ship, an ordinary object, yet he remembers what it became, a place of weakness, a place of survival, a reminder that sometimes freedom requires restraint. He touches the mast. Perhaps he thinks of the man he was before the song. Perhaps he wonders whether the Sirens changed him. The answer is difficult. Odysseus remains curious. He remains determined. He remains the same restless mind searching for understanding. But now he carries another knowledge. Not knowledge of the world, knowledge of himself. And perhaps that is the answer the Sirens could never give him. The greatest mysteries are not always found beyond distant shores. Sometimes they are found within the person who is brave enough to look. The stars appear overhead. The ship moves quietly through the darkness. The crew sleeps. Odysseus watches the horizon. Ithaca is still far away. More dangers remain. More losses. More choices. But tonight, the memory of the Sirens rests behind him. Not as a wound, not as a temptation, as a lesson. The wax is gone. The ropes are gone. But the wisdom remains. The sea continues carrying the ship westward. Days pass. The island of the Sirens becomes smaller in memory, but not in meaning. Some events disappear quickly after they happen. Others remain quietly within a person, shaping decisions long after the danger has ended. The Sirens belong to the second kind. Odysseus survived their song, but survival is only the beginning of understanding. You can imagine him sitting beneath the night sky, watching waves move beneath the stars, thinking about what almost happened. The ropes have left marks upon his body. The voices have left marks upon his mind. The physical wounds will fade. The questions may not. Why did he survive? Was it because of intelligence? Because of preparation? Because the gods favoured him? Because fate required him to continue? Ancient Greek audiences would have found all of these possibilities meaningful. The Greeks often imagined human life as a meeting point between choice and forces beyond human control. A person could act wisely, yet still depend upon fortune. A hero could possess extraordinary abilities, yet still require help from others. Odysseus survives because many things come together. His intelligence creates the plan. Circe's warning provides the knowledge. The crew provides the obedience. The ropes provide the restraint. The ship provides the path forward. Remove any one of these, and the outcome may have changed. That is what makes the episode so powerful. The hero does not survive because he is invincible. He survives because he knows he is not. This may be the greatest transformation in the story. Earlier in his journey, Odysseus often relies upon his own ability to improvise. When danger appears, he thinks faster than others, he creates disguises, he invents stories, he finds weaknesses in stronger enemies. Those qualities make him remarkable, but they also create a danger. A person who has escaped many impossible situations may begin to believe every situation can be solved alone. The Sirens challenge that belief. They cannot be defeated by clever words. They cannot be tricked. They cannot be fought. Odysseus must prepare before the battle begins, and preparation requires admitting weakness. That admission is difficult for heroes. Perhaps that is why the mast has remained one of the most memorable images from the Odyssey. A hero is usually shown standing, holding a weapon, leading others, facing danger. But Odysseus is remembered here because he is restrained. He wins by accepting limitation. The image carries a deeper symbolic meaning. The mast is part of the ship represents the journey, and Odysseus is literally tied to the path that carries him home. He cannot abandon the voyage. He cannot follow the song. He cannot move toward the temptation. He must remain where he is. Sometimes the path forward requires refusing the path that appears most beautiful. Ancient Greek listeners would have understood this beyond the story itself. These sirens could represent many things: uncontrolled desire, dangerous knowledge, seductive speech, or the attraction of forgetting responsibility. Their song is not dangerous because it is ugly. It is dangerous because it is beautiful. That distinction matters. People rarely struggle against things they find completely unpleasant. The strongest temptations often contain something valuable. Knowledge is valuable. Memory is valuable. Rest is valuable. Understanding is valuable. The danger comes when one valuable thing becomes so important that it destroys everything else. Odysseus wanted knowledge, but he also wanted home. The Sirens offered the first and threatened the second. His survival required remembering which desire mattered most. Home, Penelope, Telemachus, Ithaca. The future, not the endless song of the past. The same lesson appears throughout Greek mythology. Orpheus descends into the underworld because love drives him beyond ordinary limits. Persephone's story explores the boundary between life and death. Prometheus reaches toward divine knowledge and suffers for crossing a boundary. Again and again, myths ask the same question: how far should mortals reach? The answer is rarely simple. Greek stories did not teach people to avoid ambition completely. They admired courage, curiosity, and greatness, but they warned against forgetting the limits that made human beings human. Odysseus walks that narrow line. He is not a man who refuses mystery. He is a man who approaches mystery carefully. That may be why the Sirens episode feels different from the other trials of his voyage. He does not escape by destroying the danger. The Sirens remain. Their voices remain. Their island remains. He simply passes beyond their reach. This is important. Some challenges in life cannot be removed. Some temptations cannot be erased. Some memories cannot be forgotten. The goal is not always to eliminate them. Sometimes the goal is to continue despite them. The ship moves beneath another sunrise. The crew works together. They have changed too. They no longer see Odysseus only as the clever king who finds solutions. They have seen the man beneath the title. They have seen his fear, his uncertainty, his need for help, and perhaps this makes him a stronger leader. Not because he became perfect, because he became more human. Historians and literary scholars continue to discuss why the Sirens episode remains one of the most influential moments in ancient literature. Some view it as an exploration of temptation and self-control. Others see it as a reflection on the relationship between knowledge and destruction. Another interpretation suggests that the Sirens represent the dangers of excessive attachment to the past. All of these readings survive because the story continues to speak to different generations. a sailor from ancient Greece, a scholar studying Homer, a listener resting beneath modern skies. Each can find something familiar in the song. The details of life change. The human heart changes much less. Everyone knows what it means to hear a voice promising something impossible to resist. Everyone understands the desire to know what cannot be known. Everyone has moments when a wiser version of themselves must prepare for a weaker one. That is why Odysseus survives. Not because he is stronger than temptation, because he understands that temptation is stronger than he is. The sea becomes quiet. The stars appear. The ship moves onward toward danger still waiting. But the lesson of the Sirens travels with him. A person is not defined only by the battles they win. Sometimes they are defined by the wisdom to know which battles cannot be fought alone. The ship continues through the endless blue of the Mediterranean. But the memory of the Sirens remains like a distant melody, carried on a wind that no longer reaches the sails. Odysseus has survived. The crew has survived. Yet the question that follows him is not simply how he escaped. It is why he was allowed to escape. In the world of ancient Greece, survival was never viewed as something entirely separate from the will of the gods. Mortals worked, planned, fought, and endured. But they lived within a universe filled with divine powers, a sudden storm, an unexpected victory, a miraculous escape, or a terrible loss could all be interpreted as moments where human life touched something greater. Odysseus knows this better than most. His journey has never been only a voyage across water. It has been a movement through a world where gods, monsters, spirits, and fate exist beside ordinary human experience. The Sirens belong to that world, but their exact place within it remains mysterious. Were they servants of a divine order? Were they dangerous spirits existing outside it? Were they simply creatures who understood the hidden desires of mortals? The ancient stories never fully decide. Perhaps that uncertainty is what makes them powerful. A clear enemy can be understood. A mysterious one remains with you. Odysseus sits beneath the evening sky, watching the stars emerge one by one. The sailors around him prepare the ship for another night. Fires are carefully protected from the wind. Food is divided. Water jars are checked. Ordinary life continues, but above them stretches the same sky that ancient Greeks believed was filled with divine meaning. The stars were not merely distant lights. They were stories. Heroes transformed into constellations. Creatures remembered through celestial patterns. Signs of a universe where human actions could echo beyond a single lifetime. Perhaps Odysseus wonders whether his own story has already become part of that larger design. He has heard prophecies. He has spoken with the dead. He has received warnings from gods and godlike beings. Yet none of them have given him a complete map. That may be one of the most important ideas within Greek mythology. Knowledge exists, but complete knowledge belongs somewhere beyond humanity. The Sirens tempted him because they appeared to offer what even prophets could not. Everything. No uncertainty, no unanswered questions, no hidden future. But perhaps the gods never intended mortals to possess that kind of knowledge. Perhaps uncertainty itself is part of being human. The Greeks told stories of individuals who reached beyond their limits. Sometimes they were rewarded, sometimes they suffered. Prometheus brought fire to humanity and changed the world. But he also endured punishment for crossing a boundary. Icarus flew toward the heavens with wings of human creation, but ignored the warnings that protected him. Even heroes admired for greatness often encounter the danger of excess. Odysseus stands among them. His curiosity makes him extraordinary. It also places him in danger. The Sirens are not the first time his desire to know has changed his fate. The Cyclops episode remains behind him like a shadow. At first his curiosity seemed harmless. A cave. A stranger. A question. What kind of creature lives there? That question led to imprisonment, escape, and eventually the anger of Poseidon. The curse of the Cyclops continues through the entire voyage. The sea itself becomes a reminder that one moment can reshape years of life. Perhaps the Sirens were another version of the same lesson, but there is a difference. At the Cyclops cave, Odysseus acted without preparation. At the Sirens' island, he prepared because he had learned. This is why his journey is not simply a collection of adventures. It is a transformation. Each danger teaches him something. Each loss changes him. Each survival carries a price. The sailors begin speaking quietly among themselves. They remember the island. They remember the strange silence. They remember watching their captain fight against something they could not see. To them, the Sirens will always remain a mystery. They did not hear the song. They only saw its effect. Perhaps this creates another kind of wisdom. Sometimes people who stand outside a temptation can see more clearly than the person experiencing it. Odysseus heard the beauty. The crew saw the danger. Both perspectives were necessary. This balance appears throughout Greek thought. Reason and emotion, desire and restraint, human effort and divine influence, the individual and the community. The hero alone is incomplete. The journey alone is incomplete. Everything exists in relationship. The wind changes during the night. The ship turns slightly. The sailors adjust the sail. A small movement. A small decision. Yet small decisions shape long journeys. Odysseus knows this. He has learned that fate does not always arrive as a single dramatic moment. Sometimes it arrives through choices made quietly. A decision to enter a cave. A decision to reveal a name. A decision to listen to a song. A decision to trust companions. The gods may influence the path, but mortals still walk it. Historians and interpreters continue to debate the role of divine forces in the Odyssey. Some view the gods as active powers guiding events. Others understand them as symbolic representations of human emotions, natural forces, and social values. Both perspectives reveal something about the ancient imagination. The Greeks did not separate the human world from the mysterious world around it. The sea could be physical and sacred. A storm could be weather and divine anger. A song could be music and a test of the soul. Odysseus continues sailing beneath that understanding. He is not merely trying to escape dangers. He is learning how to exist within a world that cannot be completely controlled. The Sirens offered him total knowledge. The voyage offers him something different. Experience, memory, wisdom. The slow understanding that comes only from living through uncertainty. The stars move overhead. The waves continue their endless rhythm. And somewhere behind the ship, beyond sight and beyond sound, the Sirens remain upon their shore, still singing, still waiting. But Odysseus is no longer listening. He is moving forward. The days after the Sirens feel different. The sea is the same. The sky's the same. The ship is still a wooden vessel carrying tired men across endless water. Yet something within the crew has changed. They have crossed a boundary. Before the Sirens, they feared what waited ahead. After the Sirens, they understand something deeper. Fear does not always disappear when danger passes. Sometimes it transforms into knowledge. The sailors now know that the most terrifying moments are not always the loudest ones. The Sirens did not attack with weapons. They did not chase the ship. They did not create a storm. They waited. They offered. They invited. And that made them dangerous. Odysseus understands this better than anyone. He has learned that the greatest threats are not always those that stand before you with visible strength. Sometimes the most powerful dangers arrive quietly, speaking directly to the hidden desires within the heart. But the voyage is not finished. The warnings of Circe remain. The sea ahead is still filled with trials, and among them waits the narrow passage between Scylla and Charybdis. As the ship moves onward, the landscape begins to change. The endless horizon becomes broken by distant mountains. Dark shapes rise from the sea, their peaks covered by mist. The waters narrow between rocky shores, creating a passage where currents become unpredictable and dangerous. The sailors recognize the signs. A place like this demands caution. Ancient Mediterranean sailors understood that geography itself could become a source of fear. Narrow channels, hidden rocks, sudden currents, and violent tides could transform ordinary voyages into battles for survival. Myth gave these dangers faces, names, stories. Charybdis became the terrible force beneath the water, a living embodiment of the sea's ability to consume. Scylla became the danger above, the monster hidden among the cliffs. Together they represented a choice no sailor wanted. Move toward one danger or another. Sometimes survival meant choosing the lesser loss. This idea would have carried deep meaning for Greek audiences. Life did not always offer perfect victories. Sometimes every choice carried pain. A person could choose carefully and still suffer. A leader could act wisely and still lose people. A hero could do everything correctly and still face tragedy. Odysseus is about to learn this again, but before the danger arrives, he remembers the Sirens. He remembers the mast. He remembers the ropes. That memory matters because it changes how he approaches the next challenge. Before the Sirens, he believed knowledge could help him overcome anything. After the Sirens, he understands something more complicated. Knowledge can prepare you, but it cannot remove every wound. The prophecy of Circe now feels heavier. When she warned him about Scylla and Charybdis, she did not promise victory. She promised survival. There is a difference. The Greeks often imagined prophecy as a difficult gift. Knowing the future did not necessarily make life easier. Sometimes it created new suffering because the person who knew what was coming had to continue walking toward it. Odysseus carries that burden now. He knows danger is near. The crew does not know every detail. Should he tell them? Should he describe the monster waiting among the cliffs? Should he explain that some men may not survive? This is the same problem he faced before the Sirens. A leader must decide what knowledge helps and what knowledge destroys hope. He chooses silence, not because he does not care, because he does. The sailors have already endured too much. Sometimes a person in command must carry fear so others can continue moving. This decision reveals another side of Odysseus. He is not only clever, he is burdened. Every choice becomes a weight. Every survival carries the memory of those who are lost. The ship enters the shadow of the cliffs. The sound of the water changes. Waves strike against stone. Echoes travel through narrow spaces. The sailors look upward. Above them, birds circle through the mist. One disappears behind the rocks. Then another. A small detail, perhaps nothing. But in a world shaped by omens, it attracts attention. Ancient Greeks often searched the natural world for meaning. A bird's flight, a sudden storm, an unexpected silence. Or a strange animal behavior could become a sign requiring interpretation. Was this an omen, a warning from the gods, or simply nature behaving naturally? No one aboard can know. The uncertainty itself creates tension. Odysseus looks toward the cliffs. He remembers another warning. The Sirens promised knowledge, but the world ahead reminds him that knowledge always has limits. Even if you know danger is coming, you may not know exactly how it will feel. You may not know who will suffer. You may not know how you will change afterward. The ship moves closer. The sailors grip their oars. The water begins pulling harder. A deep sound rises from somewhere ahead. Not a song, not a voice, a roar. The men freeze. The sound rolls through the passage like distant thunder. Then another sound answers. A violent movement beneath the waves. The sea opens and closes. The ship rocks. Odysseus raises his hand. The crew watches him. This time they can hear. This time there is no wax, no hidden song, no invisible enemy, only the captain and the danger before them. The Sirens taught Odysseus how to trust others. Now Scylla and Charybdis will test whether he can carry the responsibility of choosing who can be saved. The cliffs close around the ship. Mist covers the water, and ahead, where the sea narrows into darkness, the next trial begins. The ship moves beyond the shadow of Scylla and Charybdis, but the silence left behind is heavier than any storm. The sea has opened again. The cliffs have disappeared into the distance. The horizon returns, wide and endless beneath the fading light. Yet the men aboard the ship are not the same men who entered that passage. Some voices are missing. Some places on the deck are empty. The journey continues, but every sailor now understands a truth that Odysseus has carried for years. Returning home does not mean returning unchanged. The ship is filled with survivors, and survivors carry memories. Odysseus stands near the mast. The same mast that once held him during the Sirens now stands quietly beside him. No longer a prison, no longer a symbol of restraint, just wood. just part of the ship. But he remembers what it became. He remembers the song. He remembers the voices. He remembers the moment when he wanted something so badly that he had to ask others to save him from himself. Perhaps that memory feels different now after the loss at Scylla. The Sirens took no lives directly, but they revealed something about him. Scylla took lives, and revealed something else. Even wisdom cannot prevent every tragedy. This is one of the deepest tensions within the story of Odysseus. He is extraordinary. He is intelligent. He is resourceful, yet he remains mortal. The ancient Greeks admired heroes not because they escaped all suffering, but because they faced suffering with courage. A perfect person would have been difficult to recognize. A wounded person trying to continue was something human. As evening settles, Odysseus sits with his companions. The sailors speak quietly. They remember those who are gone. They say their names. This act is important. In ancient Greek culture, memory was closely connected with identity. To be remembered was to continue existing beyond death. Epic poetry itself functioned as a form of remembrance, preserving the names and deeds of people who would otherwise disappear. The Sirens understood the power of memory. They sang the past back to Odysseus, but their version of memory was dangerous because it offered endless return. The crew understands another kind of memory, a memory that allows people to continue, a memory that honors the dead without becoming trapped among them. That difference separates the sailors from the Sirens. The Sirens preserve everything, but they preserve it in a way that stops movement. Human beings, however, must continue. They must carry the past while still walking toward the future. Odysseus knows this now. Perhaps that is why he does not speak much about the song. He could describe it. He could tell them the words. He could explain what he saw. But would that truly share the experience? Some moments cannot be transferred. A person can describe a storm, but another person cannot feel the cold rain on the same skin. A person can describe grief, but another person cannot carry the exact weight of the same loss. The Sirens gave Odysseus a private encounter, and perhaps that privacy is part of the mystery. Historians and literary scholars continue to examine why Homer leaves so much about the Sirens unexplained. Some believe the missing details are intentional because the unknown creates a stronger emotional effect. Others suggest that the episode works because every generation can imagine its own version of the irresistible song. The unanswered question becomes part of the story. What would the Sirens sing to you? What memory would they bring forward? What promise would be hardest to refuse? For Odysseus, the answer was clear. Home, not simply a place, a collection of memories. A wife, a child, an island, a life interrupted. The Sirens knew that, or seemed to, and perhaps that is what makes them frightening. They did not offer something unfamiliar. They offered something deeply loved. Night falls over the sea. The sailors prepare their sleeping places. The stars appear. Odysseus looks upward. Somewhere among those stars are stories of heroes, gods, and creatures transformed into eternal symbols. The Greeks looked into the heavens and found reminders of their myths written across darkness. Perhaps Odysseus wonders whether his own journey will someday become one of those stories. Perhaps he wonders whether anyone will understand the man behind the legend, because legends often simplify people. They remember victories. They remember clever plans. They remember escapes. But they do not always remember the quiet moments, the doubt, the fear, the loneliness, the weight of choices. The Sirens saw those hidden parts. They sang to the man beneath the hero, and that may be why their voices were almost impossible to resist. The next day arrives. The sea remains calm. The ship continues toward the final stages of its long journey. Yet another challenge waits. The sacred cattle of Helios. Another warning. Another temptation. Another moment where desire must be controlled. The pattern continues. The voyage home is not a straight road. It is a series of choices. A person becomes who they are through those choices. Odysseus has already chosen to listen. He has already chosen to survive. He has already chosen to remember. Now he must choose again. The wind moves gently. The ship disappears into the distance. Behind it lies the island of the Sirens, hidden beyond the horizon. No one can see it, no one can hear it, but Odysseus carries its song, not as a command, not as a temptation, as a memory. And perhaps, after everything, that's the only way anyone truly escapes the Sirens, not by forgetting the song. By learning how to live after hearing it, the ship continues toward Ithaca. But the story of the Sirens does not end when the island disappears. That is the strange nature of ancient myths. A moment can pass in the world of the story and continue living in the minds of everyone who hears it. The Sirens remain, not on a map, not upon a visible shore, but within memory. Generations after the first listeners heard the tale of Odysseus, the image of the Sirens continued to change. Artists, poets, philosophers, and storytellers returned to them again and again, each finding something different hidden beneath their song. Some saw them as creatures of the sea. Some saw them as spirits connected with death. Some saw them as symbols of temptation. Others saw something even more subtle, the danger of knowledge itself. You can understand why they remained fascinating. The Sirens represent a question that never disappears. How much should human beings desire to know? The ancient Greeks valued wisdom deeply. They admired philosophers who searched for truth. They honored poets who preserved memory. They respected priests and prophets who sought understanding of the divine. But they also understood that knowledge without humility could become dangerous. The story of Odysseus approaches this boundary carefully. The Sirens do not offer foolishness. They do not offer meaningless pleasure. They offer knowledge. That is what makes them different from ordinary temptations. Their danger is not that they offer something worthless. Their danger is that they offer something valuable without limits. And limits matter. The Greeks lived in a world where boundaries were everywhere, between humans and gods, between life and death, between the known sea and the unknown horizon, between honor and pride. The Sirens exist exactly at those boundaries. Their voices come from a place between beauty and danger. Their bodies combine human and animal forms. Their island lies between land and sea. Their song exists between truth and illusion. Perhaps that is why they have remained so memorable. They are difficult to place, and things that cannot be easily placed often remain powerful. Centuries after Homer, the Sirens appeared in different artistic traditions. Ancient Greek pottery preserved their images. Later, Roman writers continued their stories. Medieval and Renaissance artists transformed them again, sometimes blending them with other sea creatures and symbols of temptation. The details changed. The warning remained. Listen carefully. Not every beautiful voice leads somewhere good. Not every answer brings peace. Not every desire should be followed. The story also changed how people understood Odysseus. Before the Sirens, he was often remembered as the clever survivor, the man who escaped through intelligence, the man who defeated stronger enemies with strategy. But the Sirens reveal another dimension. They show a hero who understands his own weakness. That may be one reason the episode has endured. A flawless hero would feel distant. A hero who knows he can fail feels closer. Odysseus does not win because he has no temptation. He wins because he prepares for temptation. That idea has travelled far beyond ancient Greece. Modern interpretations often view the mast and ropes as symbols of self-control. A person may create boundaries before facing a difficult choice. A person may ask others for support before a moment of weakness arrives. The lesson is surprisingly modern. The ancient sailor and the modern listener share something important. Both live with voices calling from different directions. Some voices come from memory, some from desire, some from fear, some from ambition. The question is not whether those voices exist. The question is how we respond. The Sirens continue singing because every generation understands them differently. For one person, they represent the temptation to remain in the past. For another, they represent the desire to possess impossible knowledge. For another, they represent the search for a perfect answer that life cannot provide. Perhaps that is why the ancient story never gives the final words of the song. If Homer had written every detail, the mystery would have ended. Instead, the silence allows every listener to imagine. What would you hear? What voice would know your name? What memory would be powerful enough to make you stop moving? These questions remain unanswered, and perhaps they should. The ship continues, Odysseus continues. The story moves beyond the Sirens toward the final trials of his voyage, but the lesson of the island remains beside him. The past can call, the unknown can call, the impossible dream can call, and sometimes the strongest response is not to pretend the voice does not exist. It is to hear it, understand it, and continue onward. The sea grows quieter as night approaches. The sailors rest. The stars appear above the dark water. Somewhere behind them, the Sirens remain upon their distant shore. Their voices travel through mythology, through poetry, through centuries of human imagination. Still beautiful, still mysterious, still dangerous. But Odysseus has learned what many travellers must eventually learn. A person cannot escape every song. A person cannot silence every desire. A person cannot remove every mystery from the world. But a person can choose where to go after hearing them. And that choice is where the journey continues. The sea is calm now, not the unnatural silence that surrounded the island of the Sirens, not the heavy stillness that warned of something waiting beneath the surface. This is a gentler calm, the kind that comes after a storm has passed, the kind that allows a weary traveller to finally listen to ordinary things again. The ship moves beneath a sky filled with stars. The waves touch the wooden hull with a quiet rhythm. The sailors rest after another long day of rowing, repairing, watching, and surviving. And Odysseus remains awake. Perhaps he always will be, at least for a little while. Some experiences leave a person changed in ways that cannot be easily seen. The ropes around his body have left no lasting mark. The wax has disappeared. The island has vanished. But the song remains somewhere within him, not as a temptation, not as a command. As a memory, you can imagine him looking across the dark water, wondering about everything that happened. The Sirens promised complete knowledge. They offered answers to questions that had followed him across the world. They seemed to know the past. They seemed to understand the present. Perhaps they even knew something of the future. Yet after hearing their song, Odysseus discovered something unexpected. Knowing everything would not necessarily bring peace. A person could understand every event and still suffer. A person could know every reason and still grieve. A person could see the entire road ahead and still have to walk it one step at a time. That may be the deepest lesson hidden within the encounter. Life is not meaningful because every mystery is solved. Life is meaningful because people continue even while mysteries remain. Odysseus began his journey wanting to return home. But the voyage changed the meaning of home. At the beginning, Ithaca was simply a place, an island, a palace, a kingdom waiting beyond the sea. After years of wandering, Ithaca became something more. It became memory. It became love. It became the people who waited, the people who were lost, the person he hoped he could still become. The Sirens understood his longing because they understood the human desire to return to what was lost. That desire is ancient. Every generation carries it. People look backward toward childhood, toward old homes, toward moments that can never fully return. The past can be beautiful, but the past can also become a shore where a person remains forever. Odysseus escaped because he chose the future, not because he forgot the past. He carried it with him. That is the difference. Memory should be a companion, not a prison. The Greeks understood this deeply. Their stories were built from memory. Poets preserved heroes through spoken words passed from one generation to another. Festivals, temples, and rituals kept ancient figures alive long after their supposed time had passed. The Greeks knew that remembering mattered, but they also knew that life required movement. A person must honor what came before while continuing toward what comes next. Odysseus does this. He remembers Troy. He remembers his lost companions. He remembers the Sirens, but he keeps sailing. The final part of his journey remains ahead. There will be more dangers, more choices, more moments where he must decide what kind of person he will be. The Sirens were not the end of his story. They were a mirror. They showed him the part of himself that desired impossible knowledge. They showed him the weakness hidden inside his greatest strength. And they showed him that even the wisest person sometimes needs another person to hold the rope. Perhaps that is why the episode has survived for thousands of years. It is not only a story about a mythical creature, it is a story about being human. Everyone hears voices. Everyone faces moments when something beautiful calls from the wrong direction. Everyone has memories that pull backward and dreams that pull forward. The question is not whether the song exists. The question is whether we can continue after hearing it. The ship moves onward. The horizon slowly brightens. Another morning approaches. Odysseus is still far from Ithaca, but he is closer than he was before, not only because of the distance crossed, because of the person he has become. The man who entered the waters of the Sirens wanted answers. The man who left them carried wisdom, not the wisdom of knowing everything, the wisdom of understanding that some things must remain unknown. The sea stretches endlessly beneath the stars. The wind moves softly across the sail. The voices of the Sirens are now only echoes belonging to another shore, another moment, another part of the long journey. And slowly, the world becomes quiet. You remain beside the ancient ship for a final moment. You hear the gentle movement of water against wood. You feel the cool night air drifting across the open sea. You see the stars shining above a traveller who has survived storms, monsters, gods, and his own deepest desires. The journey continues, but for now there is only the sea, only the stars, only the slow rhythm of waves carrying Odysseus toward home. The forgotten voices fade into the distance. The darkness becomes peaceful. The horizon waits patiently, and somewhere beyond it, beneath the first light of morning, lies the island he has never stopped seeking, Ithaca.